Stephen and Andrew from our team are online, so they'll be, admitting people and muting people and those sorts of things during the day. But we haven't got a great deal of time together. I know it seems like a long time until, well, 2:30 p.m. my time from Melbourne, but we've really got a fair bit of ground to cover today. So we'll be moving pretty fast and giving you each opportunity to have some discussions and do some activities and those sorts of things as well. So my name's Travis Smith. I'm the K-12 industry lead for Microsoft. My background is from teaching and school leadership. I taught at a school called Frankston High School, which is in Victoria and was the first government school in the world to put laptops in the hands of kids. In 1992, they started that program, which is pretty crazy because the technology was a lot different to what we're grappling with now. Battery life of an hour and a half was pretty good. And so now we're sort of after all day battery and all those sorts of things. So, and then I was assistant principal in charge of HR and other bits and pieces, and managed the sort of technology program in that school. And then also did some lecturing at Monash University in the education faculty as well. So my background really is in education and then thinking about the way that technology can really enhance it. And hopefully you'll see that as a theme today as we focus on things that can make a positive difference for students and teachers in our schools around technology. So with that, what we're doing in this program, and just let me give you a summary because you might have sort of just got an email from someone going, you've got to go to this leadership session. You don't know what it's about or why you're here. This is what we call the Microsoft School Transformation Program. And it was born because a lot of schools come to us and say, if you were to set up a school, what sort of stuff would you think about? What would you do? Because, there's so much stuff in the Microsoft ecosystem of technology for schools. And so the idea of this whole program is to give schools an opportunity to sort of get immersed in Microsoft technology, but different members of the school community come along. And so the first part of it is the leadership workshop. And we're going to use this thing on the right-hand side here, which is called the Education Transformation Framework. And I'll talk about that in a sec. But really, it serves a couple of purposes, this workshop we're doing today. The first purpose is that we want the leaders in the schools to make sure that you're the ones who aren't necessarily driving the innovation, but supporting the innovation from the top. And we need to make sure that we've got the leaders on board so that other things can sort of happen throughout the school. And you've got the idea of exactly what your vision for the school is, what your vision for teaching and learning is, and what your vision for technology might be too. And so it's really important that we do this leadership workshop. The second reason we're doing this today is to sort of show you these little glimpses of the stuff that other members of your school community will go through. What are the teachers going to be doing? What's the accessibility stuff that some of your teaching aides or others might come to as part of this program? And to give you just a little bit of a taste, not enough to skill you fully, but just to give you a taste so that you go, okay, I know what they're doing. I can get behind this as a transformation project for our school. So we're going to be doing that today. Your teachers will then be doing what we call an MIE, Microsoft Innovative Educator Trainer Academy. In Victoria and South Australia, I think it's going to be called an e-learning leaders academy. But basically what it is a couple of days worth of PD to upskill a subset of your teachers, a couple of teachers from your school, to become what we call an MIE trainer, Microsoft Innovative Educator Trainer. And the reason we do that is so that you've got a scalable mechanism in your school to be able to have them train other teachers in the lots of stuff that you'll see about today. And so your teachers will get an opportunity to do that as we go through. There's also an inclusive classroom session, which is really about the accessibility technology that we have built in. And so you'll have access to this right now. You may not know about some of the features. I'll do a half an hour on that sort of stuff later on, just to whet your appetite and make sure you understand a little bit about it. But your teachers will do, or your support teachers will do a full day on that if they've signed up to that workshop. And the last one, of course, is the IT Pros. Now, the IT Pro session will be run by different people depending on what state or territory you're in, and it will cover slightly different content too, because some of the departments of education that you might be from have an environment already rolled out and ready to go, and you don't need to worry about managing stuff. And some of the independent schools have to have people on site who are managing every different element of it. So we've tailored it a little bit and customized it a little bit, but there is a day for your IT folk to get involved also. So what are we hoping to do today? And then I'll show you the agenda so you know when we're having a lunch break and what sessions we're covering. I'm going to start pretty big, talking about some of the big picture stuff, what we experienced during the lockdowns, what we can learn from that, and see what's happening globally, and talk about a sort of a platform for innovation in education. Then we're going to look at what technology can actually support innovation and start thinking about hybrid learning, which we'll talk about. And then we're going to talk about, at the end, how you can sharpen your vision for technology. I've got some documents there that will help you do some planning if you want to use them. You don't have to, of course, but there's some documents linked to the Education Transformation Framework and that will help you to do the last part, which is to focus on and ignore what is not. So this is our agenda for today. We're in the first part there, and then we're doing some sort of big picture stuff first, right up until 12:30. And at 12:30, we'll have a break. And by 12:30, we'll have had an understanding of some of the larger, big ideas going on and some big education stories of people doing pretty amazing stuff. And then down into, right, what is this hybrid learning thing, and how do I enable the technology stuff in my school? Once again, half an hour is not enough time for you to learn how to do that stuff, but that's not the job of the leaders. The leaders, we really just want to give you enough information so that you go, okay, I kind of get it. I don't need to know it deeply, but I kind of get it. And so now I know what we're pushing behind. After lunch, we're going to have a look at some research-based work behind the cognitive science behind using technology in learning. And so that'll be a pretty tech-heavy, science-heavy kind of presentation where we'll talk about the kinds of technology that support students in their thinking. And then after that, we'll do inclusive classroom, which is the accessibility tools. I'll show you some stuff for that and give you some resources you could use with your parent community. And then we'll finish off with the creating a plan. So it's really 2 times 1.5 hours that we'll be doing. And I've got an activity for you that's kicking off in about 3 or 4 minutes. So, and if I keep looking over here, it's because that's where your faces are. So I'll just mute that. Yeah, so if I keep looking over there, that's because that's where I've got your faces sort of pinned so I can see people. All right. So one of the things we always get asked at Microsoft is, oh, you've been doing technology in education for 30 years. Can't you just tell us some of the things that you've done and so we can sort of shortcut and not make mistakes that other people have made? And so that's a real challenge for us because there is a long history in technology, but we do have, we have created this book, and I'll give you a link to this book in a second. And it's a nice book that is quite well designed in terms of it's an easy read. It's got big green sections that say, hey, focus on these things, and big red ones that say, don't make these mistakes. Sorry, people. Sorry about that beep beep. We Troy, who set up the meeting, he's running a workshop at the moment, so he couldn't change the settings to stop it beeping when people come in. But that's okay. We'll just have to deal with it. So this book is really a distillation of lots of different things around, social and emotional well-being, about the cloud-based computing, about device choice, about every element of what it might take, and stuff in there on furniture, and there's stuff in there on school design, and there's stuff from Prakash Nair, who are some of the famous architects globally in this space. If you want to get a copy of that book, then we have that available for you. Andrew, can I just get you to be admitting and muting people, please?
Absolutely.
Thanks. And so here's some of the stuff that's in there. So, for example, there's policy guidance, things to avoid, don't make these mistakes people have made. There's cheat sheets, and there's also spotlights from sort of experts and people who are pretty good at this sort of stuff, like Bruce Dixon down the bottom right of the screen there. He was kind of like the father of one-to-one computing. He was involved in the first one-to-one rollout in 1988, where every child got a device at MLC school in Melbourne. And so here's a link you can go to get a copy of that book. And it's a book that basically it might have it as a nice read. This is a PDF version of it, of course. And the reason a PDF version of it is nice is that you can grab.
No, you can't. Okay, I was just going to email him to see what's going on.
Welcome, everyone who's just joined. So this is a PDF link, and it allows you to grab screens and use them in slides or things that you might want to use. So it's great. It's great being a PDF because it's an electronic version. Let's think a little bit about some of our leadership thoughts. And some of the things that are challenging, having been an assistant principal of a school of 2,000 kids myself, there's so many different things coming at you as a school leadership team that you need to think about and worry about. And one of the things I often say to people at Microsoft here is that while from the Microsoft perspective or a technology company's perspective, we think that educators and school leaders spend a lot of their time thinking about technology. And I'm saying to them, no, they don't. They don't want to think about technology. They want to have technology underpinning whatever it is they're doing with the students and their teachers to make great learning. And so while we think that there's lots of that are occupying a lot of your time, there are so many other competing priorities that you have to think about. And we know, though, that there are huge possibilities for transformation in this space. Having, for example, I'm going to talk about data-driven proactive interventions later on, and some great work happening around Australia in that space. Education unlimited by time or space would have been a weird thing to put on a slide until COVID hit. And now we kind of get it a bit. It's like, oh, yeah, okay. Well, we haven't experienced that before, and now we're really experiencing it. So there's lots of different things. And obviously, as a school leader, all of these other things that are there, defining the curriculum and engaging your communities and keeping students safe, and all these things take lots of priority in your day. And if we think about technology stuff specifically, these are some of the things that leadership teams tell us that is tough. Competing priorities for the long-term vision planning and limited access to technology or professional development, lack of tech readiness of either the school or the people in the school, lack of structure and time to do coaching and training and to really get that deep adoption. Parents might not be bought in on the vision, which is something that we focused a lot on at our school back in the day, and insufficient resources. But we know that there's already great practice happening in your school. So it's time for us to do a bit of an activity. Now, if you're in a room, you can chat to each other about this. If you're on your own, then that's absolutely fine. It's time to get out your sticky notes and your pen. And you're just going to use one of the two colors of sticky notes if you've got two colors. If you don't, that's cool. And we want you to reflect one idea per sticky note. So one idea per sticky note. What are we doing well at our school already in terms of our technology stuff? Now, that might be any of the things down the bottom right-hand side there, or anything else you can think of. What are we doing well? One idea per sticky note. Have we got a great PD program for teachers? Did we really nail remote learning, depending on what state you're in? That might have been 1 week or it might have been 3 months. We've got really good technology in our classrooms. We've got great teaching and learning strategies happening. We've got good leadership in ICT, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Great STEM curriculum, whatever. So I might give you a little less than 5. I might give you 3 minutes to start writing down one idea per sticky note, please. To start writing down what are some of the things that you are doing really well at your school at the moment. So take 3 minutes, one idea per sticky note. Go for it. If you don't have sticky notes, just write them down on a scrap of paper that we can maybe organize later.
Travis, just while you're there, I've made it so attendees can't unmute. So just FYI, we'll change that when you want them to
Okay.
add out. But I just wanted to make that super clear in case no one was communicating back to you, just to make it a little bit easier for you.
Okay, 50 seconds left. One idea per sticky note. What are we doing well? Okay, time is up. So hopefully you had a chance to write some ideas down. Those sticky notes. Now, if you've only got one color of sticky today, can you just go to your sticky notes and put a little plus in the top corner? And just a little plus in the top corner of each one? Just because we want to delineate, hey, things we're doing well, and later on we're going to talk about, hey, things we could work on. So just put a plus, a little positive sign in the top of each of the corners of sticky notes. Unless you've got two colors, then you'll be able to differentiate those later. Okay, so one of the challenges that we often have in schools, and we're going to introduce you to the education transformation framework here as a framework to sort of help you sort of guide, what should I be thinking about? What are all the things that we need to consider? And so in the bottom left-hand side there, I suppose, is something that we often see, and it's not a criticism, but it's a reality that we see in a lot of schools, and that is that very quickly having no strategy becomes the strategy. And what I mean by that is that often the school leaders, the assistant principals or principal, can't be the technology leader in the school because they didn't sort of start their teaching career with it. Times changed, you know, they don't have that experience of hands-on in the classroom sometimes, and that'll obviously change over the course of the next 10 or so years. But then what happens is an e-learning coordinator is appointed, or someone like that, who's going to lead the digital pedagogy strategy. Often people in those roles can sometimes be people who don't have a vision, but are really good at using tools. And so then what you get is this sort of disparity where we have these e-learning champions just running around going, let's do this, and then I'm bored of that, let's do this, and here's 58 ideas, and 20% of your teachers are really on board. And a lot of the teachers are just like, can you just slow down and can we just focus on a few things? It takes me a while to get this in my brain and to get to use this stuff. And so that, you know, we also see schools where no strategy becomes the strategy because they say, we're going to turn on everything. And we're going to have Moodle, and we're going to have Compass, and we're going to have Office 365, and we're going to use a bit of Google, and we're going to use everything. And that's what kids should be exposed to. And the reality is there's research to show that that doesn't help students or teachers to perform at their best. And so when we think about this stuff, so Microsoft created this education transformation framework with 70 global thought leaders. And we also included UNESCO, OECD, and some other large organizations globally. Basically, this is the answer to the question, Microsoft, what should we think about, or what do good school systems or good schools think about? And what do they get right to make them successful in this space? And so it's broken up into these four large areas: leadership and policy with those four subparts, teaching and learning, of course, with those four subparts, student and school success with those four subparts, and intelligent environments, which is more the techie sort of stuff. And so when we think about this, there's research and white papers behind each one of these, and there's a lot of work that's gone into this. There's a framework really that'll be quite arbitrary to you, I understand, because it's something new that you may not have seen before, but it's just a way for us to distill down of all the great school systems or schools we've seen around the world. These were some common things they focused on which made them successful. And it evolves. It evolves all the time. For example, hybrid learning, which we'll talk about in a minute, was something that wasn't really on the radar pre-COVID, but now there are many countries around the world who are still in a face-to-face plus online environment all day, every day. Some of them are still completely remote. We'll talk about that as we go through. And so this framework sort of gives us a holistic approach, just a view of the different things we should think about. And it's a great way to bring everyone to the table and say, hey, you know, what are we doing here? And have we thought about that one? And what does that mean? Let's dig into that a little bit more. So I'm just going to step through what the 4 different quadrants are. So leadership and policy is the first one, which obviously is sort of the core business of lots of people on the session today. But it's a vision for change, strategic management and change management. And change management's an interesting one because we don't talk about it a lot in schools, but there's a lot of theory behind what it takes to create change. Continuous improvement and culture, and community engagements and partnerships. They're the 4 sort of subparts of leadership and policy. And if you think about what do those 4 things mean, there's some kind of guiding questions there you can have a bit of a look at. By the way, I will give you all a copy of these slides at the end of the day. You don't need to grab screenshots or whatever, you're more than welcome to, but I will make sure that you've got a PDF version of all of these slides so you can grab any of this stuff later on. And you'll also have the recording if you want someone to listen to a 5-minute snippet or something down the track, you'll be able to do that too. Teaching and learning, student-centered learning, curriculum and assessment, which of course these are the core business of schools, the impact of devices, because devices aren't all equal, we'll talk about that, and then what is the impact of a learning space. And the kinds of spaces that we're seeing being developed in schools at the moment are pretty exciting and interesting, only if matched by the types of pedagogies that are deployed in those spaces. And so there's some work around that, and there's some work from Prakash Nair and others who inform some of the thinking around this, and some guiding questions around teaching and learning. Intelligent environments is sort of the IT side of the house. Hybrid learning is really, it's both. It's an IT platform choice and the way you structure the technology, which we'll spend a bit of time talking about between now and 12:30. 12:30 Australian Eastern Daylight Time in the next hour or so. But hybrid learning is also a methodology. It's also about the pedagogy, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. Safety and security on a computer network is paramount. Sometimes that's for you is managed by the department level or a Catholic diocese level, and sometimes it's an in-house thing that you have to manage in an independent school. Optimized sustainable operations in the back end, and then advanced analytics and AI is the next wave of what we're going to see in this space. And once again, there's some guiding questions which you can have a bit of a look at. And if you're interested in digging in, you can go to that aka.ms/ETF, and you can grab copies of lots of different documents around this if there's one that floats your boat. The last one is student and school success, and that is talking about PD, professional development, future ready skills, which is the kinds of skills and capabilities, not only in our students moving forward, but also in our teachers. Social and emotional learning is a big one, to make sure that we're focusing on that. And we know that many schools spend most of the time working on that, of course. And then, of course, the inclusion and accessibility features or ways that you sort of encourage every student to achieve their best. And some guiding questions around that. So let's take 20 minutes to sort of go a bit bigger about what we've sort of seen and what we're seeing in the world, and just some ideas of some amazing practice that we're seeing globally around education at the moment. Some of which is actually sparked by the pandemic. And in some states around Australia, it hit harder than in others. In some states, there was lockdowns multiple times. In others, there was only a couple of weeks of remote learning. But this is a paper which is not a very attractive slide, but I've put it here with the links down the bottom there because this is written by Michael Fullan and others from the New Pedagogies for Deep Learning team. And they looked at the sort of 3 phases, and I've got some links here for you. I'm just showing you this because you'll get all the slides later on. And there's actually a webinar there, which is quite interesting to hear Michael Fullan talk his way through this. But they talked about these 3 phases that we went through. Phase 1 was disruption, where we were shifting to that kind of environment. Reopening schools was the second one. The most interesting one for us, though, is what did we learn from this kind of remote learning experience? and what should we or could we take forward? In Australia, we're very fortunate, compared to other countries who are still in lockdown with kids, not really coming to school still, or at least what they're doing in some states of the US is allowing just the year 7 and 8s or just the year 3s and 4s to come for this week, and the others all stay online, and just to reduce numbers in the schools and so forth. So they're still going through that lockdown nightmare that we sort of had for a relatively brief time here in Australia. There were some really interesting findings out of this sort of lockdown. One that we've always known as educators is that well-being is a precondition for good learning. The challenge was that when you're doing that remotely, that's a really hard thing to measure and assess and work out how the kids are actually feeling. It's sometimes quite anonymous when you're teaching online. We also saw that technology shifted from being a mechanism for transmission to a mechanism for collaboration, social connectedness, and culture building. And so people started to really use the collaborative technologies they've had in their schools for a long time, and use it for a real collaboration purpose rather than just sharing files around or sending some emails or making some Word docs, that sort of stuff. Some students really thrived when they were given more choice and voice. And it's really interesting to reflect back on what were those students, how do we build the muscle of being able to cope in more of the students? And so there's interesting work that's being done around that at the moment. And so the last little point down here is that this is a US statistic, but students with special needs, for example, 55% of them didn't complete work at all. They felt really, really disconnected. And so that's a real challenge and something to reflect on. And some of the tools we'll show you later on will help your students to be able to stay on top of things. And one of the things they talk about in this white paper is, if we want a learning revolution to occur out of this, there's no better time than now. There'll never be a better time than now to assess what we're doing and think about how we could use this as a sort of positive pivot to move forward. And what Fullen and Co say is that there's two conditions are required for a learning revolution to occur. One is an acknowledgement that we could probably do things a little bit differently. And that was always kind of in the back of people's minds, and you can see some examples of that happening in all of your schools. But the second thing that the pandemic or the lockdown did was really give us an experience to see what an alternative model could look like. There are some schools around the country at the moment who are doing more work from home days for kids than ever before. They're not in lockdown. They're just realizing that there are real tangible value out of not having kids always face-to-face in the school. And so they're running, so we run a thing called the AI for Good hackathons, like teaching kids about artificial intelligence and stuff. And some schools are saying, do that from home. We can do it online. So you're going to be collaborating as a team of peers like you would be at school, but for that day, do it from home, because there's some real muscle we could build around using technology, because to be honest, we're using it right now because we couldn't be face-to-face together in rooms. And so what we talk about is this idea of what hybrid learning is. And it's kind of the distillation of all of the best things that have been face-to-face learning and should continue to be face-to-face learning, but also having an online platform that allows you to do even more when you're face-to-face, or when you're doing homework, or heavens forbid we go home and do some more remote learning, which we don't want. The combination of the best face-to-face practice plus the best digital practice coming together. For example, my wife, I'm based in Victoria, so we had lockdown, back to school lockdown. My wife is still a teacher, teaches Year 12 mathematics, and they said to their students during the middle of those lockdowns, what are we doing well? What do we want to do better next time? And when they went back into lockdown, one of the kids said, some of the kids said, and the most important thing on their survey was, we want you to keep recording those videos which we can consume before the class, or we can watch a math teacher teach a concept for 15 minutes rather than have to sit there live. Now that's flipped learning, but they can also still use that, and they're still using it now. They're all back to face-to-face this year. They're still using that means of doing face-to-face learning, but they're using some flipped learning videos as well. So let's go a bit bigger. We know that we've got this sort of industrial revolution stuff going on, and we've seen many industrial revolutions. They're saying at the moment we're in the 4th industrial revolution. And what that is a blurring between the physical and the digital. And it's a shift that's been happening for quite a while, but we're now at a tipping point where these things are really merging together and technology is becoming a tangible part of everyone's lives. And we know that there's some negative influences of that. We know that there's, a bit of scaremongering about types of jobs that are going to disappear. 47% of all jobs will be automated by 2034. It's pretty frightening. But we've kind of seen this before. Here's a picture of New York. Some of you will have stood beside that building, the Flatiron building in New York. This is a picture of New York in 1905. And what you'll notice is the modes of transport there, the number of horses that are there. As a matter of fact, 25% of the country's agriculture went into feeding the horses that drove their cities. 25% of all agriculture went to that. 20 years later, here's a picture of New York. I can't see any horses, but we see lots and lots of cars. And so comparing those two, 1905 on the left, 1925 on the right, is kind of an illustration of the change that can happen through technology, because that is technology, in a short period of time, and the kinds of things that it does displace. And so there was a lot of upheaval around the agricultural industry at that time, and all other industries too, when, for example, transportation started. And we know that, here's an example of a futuristic looking robot. It's the Nightscope security robot that roams around a car park somewhere. And if it sees some danger, its eyes go orange. And if it's really, really dangerous, its eyes go red. And we thought, oh, this is going to be interesting because we don't have security guards. Yeah, it is a bit like warning, warning. What was that from? Lost in Space or something. But we were promised flying cars, but actually what we got was kind of suicidal robots that couldn't dodge a pond. So we do have to be kind of realistic about some of the technologies and the transition we're in around technology use in the world and what it means for it. Here's a generation of people who don't see a difference between the physical and the digital. And sometimes they're going to be referred to as phygital, that physical and digital combination. If you ever think this isn't true, then next time a 15-year-old or someone in your school gets bullied on social media, just tell them to close down their account and the problem will go away. They just won't do that. It is so ingrained in them, the way that they use these technologies, social media, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or whatever they use, that it is actually forming part of their identity. It's part of the way they identify themselves, and they learn so much through there, and it's the way they now connect with their friends. But what we shouldn't do is think that this idea of all kids being digital natives means we don't have to worry about teaching them computer stuff anymore. I think this idea of kids being digital natives and us being digital immigrants is probably one of the not most harmful, but quite a harmful thing in terms of the way we think about kids with technology. This is a study. It's called the International Computer and Information Literacy Study, and it's done with 42,000 kids from around the world at year 8. And they look at whether or not they can actually use technology to do meaningful things, which doesn't include posting a photo on Instagram and tagging your friends. Doesn't include making a TikTok video. It's about using technology to gather information from a range of sources, to verify whether it's true or not, to manage that information, to synthesize it, to use it, to store it, to do things that we do sort of every day. Only 2% of students could actually reach the highest level of proficiency in using technology. It's not good enough for us to say, oh, they've grown up with it, they'll be fine. Because what they're growing up doing is very different to the skill sets you need to study well, to get a job, to work at university independently. There are lots of different skills that they don't get. Only 20% of people could work independently with computers as information gathering and management tools. Go somewhere, get information from a variety of places, and actually manage it, store it, put it together, mush it together, use it. Only 20% across 14 countries. That's pretty alarming. And so we do need to make sure that we sort of go back to some fundamental skills with our kids, especially, to be honest, in the age of the iPad, because a lot of that's sort of the entry point into technology use. And, I've talked with independent schools where they're going at grade 3. We've got a real problem. Kids don't know what a file is, how to save it. They just push the button and stuff disappears, and they come back next time and do a different isolated task. And while iPads are fantastic for that kind of activity, it's not a criticism of them. At some point, we need to kind of get our kids, maybe it's year 3, maybe it's year 4, onto a computer of some sort to start navigating the world, which is, still the reality for most of the things we do in adult life. And so we've seen this sort of shift around, virtual reality and augmented reality and mixed reality and all these sorts of things that you may have purchased for your schools. But the headline up there is interesting: AR, VR, MR. Is that BS? Have we worked that out, or are we just buying stuff because it seems cool? And so, luckily, there is actually some research now that is bearing this out when used effectively. We do know, for example, that using virtual reality, there does lead to better knowledge retention after 2 weeks. Increase in academic outcomes if you're using it, probably because of the first point. Reducing cognitive load, which is the amount of effort that the brain is going through when trying to experience new things and understand how they fit together. And so in our world, there's this idea of, a HoloLens, which is what these people are using down the bottom there. And they're standing around, a bone there that's fractured, but 4 of them are looking at the same set of bones. They're able to talk about it because during using a mixed reality headset, it's not like virtual reality where you have your sort of phone stuck in front of your face and you can't see anything else. These people can still see each other in the real world, but they kind of got holograms in their environment. And if you think that's science fiction, well, this is Case Western University during lockdown. They shipped 185 headsets out to their first year anatomy students because they couldn't be face-to-face, and they taught them through holograms. And so this is actually some screenshots of a colleague of ours, Lawrence, in Sydney, taking part in one of their courses at 1 a.m. or something our time. But this is the way that they were teaching anatomy through using the HoloLens. And you can see Lawrence's hand there, sort of his real hand over it, imposed with a hologram on top of it so you can see where things are. And it was led by Professor Sue Wish-Baratz. Did it work? Does it make a difference? Well, learning the terminology associated with anatomy is actually faster with a HoloLens experience than it was with a cadaver. They're showing improvements in retention up to 80%. And they're also, it's not about not having cadaver labs anymore in universities. It's about, is there possibilities for those cadaver labs to be used by someone else? And so what we talk about when we talk about STEM-based learning with kids, right down to junior primary school, is get kids making stuff. It's actually about making stuff. They're the dispositions we want kids to have. It's not about putting a VR headset on your head and looking at the pyramids and going, isn't this wonderful? It's about, could I make something for that technology? And so these people were displaced from jobs in South Australia. Saab was a company that we know for making cars. They also made jet planes, but they also make military systems. And so these guys were displaced from engineering departments in automotive manufacturing in Australia, and now they're building sort of holographic overlays that soldiers eventually will wear. And so RMIT have done some interesting stuff where they're changing the nature of architecture. If you've ever built a house, you'll know that the architect is probably fighting with the builder, because the architect can make these amazing designs and drawings of what might be possible, and then it has to go into two-dimensional drawings so that the builder can pick up the 2D drawings and turn it back into 3D. And then the builder says, this is impossible to build. This is stupid. You can't possibly make that. And so they're using this kind of technology now to allow builders, for example, to lay bricks in the right space, because they can see exactly where to put the stuff without having to go back from 3D to 2D plans to 3D building. And as an illustration of that, this is the University of Technology Sydney building. And it's made to look like a brown paper bag, which is just a fantastic piece of architecture. The reality is, though, that when the bricklayers got there, their efficiency or productivity decreased by 90% because they're not straight walls. And there's no way of them working out where to line up the next brick. And so University of Tassie are doing some amazing work where you can see down here Colin and his apprentice, and there are little sort of placeholders here of where to put the next brick to build a bendy wall. And so even areas like bricklaying are being impacted by technology. Here's some nurses learning at University of Canberra around using these kinds of technology to learn their skills in nursing. Here's a photo of us and some Microsoft educators from around Australia. This is Lawrence here, and he's wearing one of the HoloLensy headsets, and he's looking at that chair there. Now you can see that that chair's empty, but up on the screen is what he's actually seeing. He's actually seeing that person sit in the chair. Now the reason that's useful for a patient who's learning, healthcare or whatever, is we need that person to start sweating. We need them to go pale, and actors can't do that very effectively. So there's ways that we can sort of simulate this sort of stuff. It's very exciting, but the reality is kids aren't going to get a job out of having experienced this. You know, they need to create. And so, you know, whether even if it's in Minecraft, you can see Minecraft here, which is basically a, you know, it's like 3D Lego, right? And so on the left-hand side, you build that little housey thing, but on the right-hand side, using a Windows 10 computer, you can put that house actually on the floor. That's my lounge room floor, and rotate that little house around that you've built and walk around it like it's sitting on the environment. And you don't need a headset for that. You just need a computer with a camera, like a Windows 10 operating system. And so this is really interesting in terms of getting kids to think in 3D, create in 3D, and then even present in 3D if we go down that path. There's lots of resources, just a link there for you. There's a free lessons around STEM stuff. You know, you can see this here. Oops. This here is a, you know, kids actually make a helmet thing. This is probably a junior secondary activity. And then they have sensors on it, and they buy the sensors and whatever. And then you belt a tennis ball into it, and it measures on a spreadsheet how hard the impact is. You know, it's really trying to live that science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And there's all pre-baked activities in there ready to roll. In terms of using technology with kids, though, it's the activities you do after the step-by-step ones that matter. I heard a great story about a year 6 teacher in Singapore who said to the kids at year 6, "What are we going to do today? I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to go out of our classroom at you know, at 2 p.m. today to get school photos. Do you reckon we can spend the morning making a security system for our classroom so we know if anyone enters?" And they had some little microbit sort of control, you know, those little computer boards with cables and stuff. They had their computers. And basically what they did was they rigged up a security system in their classroom so that they could safely go to school photos that afternoon. Now, Singapore's the safest place on earth, so there was very, very low risk of any crime happening anyway. But it was about the kids going, "Oh, we've got a finite amount of time. We've got this technology. What do you mean a security system? What could we possibly do?" And they had sensors on the windows so that if they opened it, sent a Bluetooth message to the teacher's mobile phone that said the window's been breached. But the doors had sensors on the movement sensors. So if that door actually cracked, it sensed the movement on their computers and it would send a message to the teacher. You know, it's that sort of stuff that gets the juices flowing for kids, not necessarily the step-by-step stuff. And so I don't know whether you'll hear this audio. This video goes for about 2 seconds. But it's amazing what happens when you sort of let kids free with this sort of technology. So let me just play this for you, see if you can hear it.
Well, we just built a system to predict breast cancer.
Did you hear that?
All good, Travis. All good on this end.
Excellent. So we just built a system to predict breast cancer. This was an activity done with cloud-based software, something, and data sets and something called machine learning. And so these girls, we thought this was going to be an activity. This was Seymour College in Adelaide. We thought this was going to be an activity for year 11 girls in IT. These girls are in year 8. And so they built a system to predict breast cancer from a set of data in a day using technology. And they did it using sort of drag and drop based technology, not really sort of anything full on or complex. It's pretty amazing what kids will achieve. And so there's lots of stuff, resources and stuff at that link there if you're interested in getting some guides of what kind of widgets or gadgets work at different year levels and all that sort of stuff. And most of the stuff you should do with STEM-based stuff is free. Let me just shift gears for a second and talk a little bit about the future of technology in education, or one of the elements of future of technology is to see whether or not we can actually make that real. I taught for 12 years, and in a secondary context, when you're teaching 5 different lessons of 25 kids each day, personalizing learning is pretty damn hard, if not impossible. So really do it. But I think there's ways that technology might be able to help us. And so without getting technical about this stuff, there are ways that we can, just think about analytics. So descriptive analytics is what happened. That's like your teacher's roll book, right? Oh, here's what happened. They got 7 and they got 4 and they got 9. And then diagnostic analytics is why did it happen? What are the reasons it happened? When we get into the more advanced stuff, it is possible now to start using analytics. And by the way, your supermarket, your companies out there are doing this every day. Prescriptive analytics is like, what is going to happen? And let's predict that in the future, which is predictive. And then prescriptive is, and here's what you should do about it. What if there was a possibility of us saying, I can see already that this student is trending like that. If you do these 4 or 5 things for them over the next 6 months, they will do this. Or we've seen kids like this before, and when we did that to them, they went that way. And so there are systems that are now being built to sort of do this sort of stuff. Data's hard, right? Who's smarter? Well, it kind of depends what you're looking at. Their IQ's the same, but they've got different strengths and weaknesses. Or who's at greater risk, student A or B? Well, it depends. And depends on the way you look at it. But it also depends how much data you've got to crunch, because here's 25 students. Or if you're team teaching or you've got more than that, there's 50 students. Or if you're a year level coordinator, you might have a couple of 100 students. Or if you're a school principal, as many of you are, you've got that many. And so crunching that data is really hard. But technology can find patterns, and this is an emerging area that we're seeing that isn't going to be solved school by school, but is being built into the technology that we're creating to allow school leaders to make better interventions, for example, around trends in their data, without you having to have the spreadsheets printed out or color-coded up on the wall to make these sort of interventions, which are very time-consuming for us humans to do. So let me tell you a little bit of a future story. It's a higher education story. But I just want you to suspend that idea for the moment and think about the possibility of this coming down into primary school or secondary school in the future, because we're certainly working on it. This is a guy called Dr. David Kellerman. This is a true story. He works at University of New South Wales in Sydney, and he's an engineering lecturer. And there's one of his classes, 500 kids, a bit more than the 25 I had to deal with. He was an innovative lecturer anyway. He used to teach out of OneNote, which I'll present to you out of later on today, but it's basically a digital notepad where he'd do all his engineering diagrams and stuff. And that was synchronized live to the students' computers, so they had all his handwritten notes. He also used to live produce his lectures onto YouTube. So he would basically just, he would have a doctoral student sitting in the corner. They'd be responding to chat questions that would come in, and he'd answer questions straight down the camera as they came in live, as he was live presenting these lectures online. Pretty innovative guy, doing some pretty amazing teaching. And so then what he did in 2017 was he introduced Microsoft Teams, which we're going to talk about next. And it's really a collaboration piece of software that ties all of the things together. And he saw a 900% increase in collaboration as a result of this. And so what he did was he brought in all of his handwritten, notes were still happening, but they were in that same spot. He moved out of YouTube and into something called Microsoft Stream on Office 365, because now he owned the data, YouTube didn't, and he could get some analytics from that. He put all of his documents for the students to learn from, and it all became in this central hub. He also had a learning management system at university. So he plugged these Moodle pages in along the top. He had his really high-end engineering software plugged in across the top. And really that became a one-stop shop. But what he was actually doing was getting all the data from all these use cases and sort of pulling them together into a data schema. One of the things that he had as an issue for himself was that when you have 900% increase in collaboration, he caused himself some new problems. And the new problem was he was missing questions. They lost a chance to connect with students when the questions were asked via chat or whatever. And so this is where it kind of gets a bit techie, but also a bit amazing. They worked with a partner technology company called Antara Solutions, and they built a bot. And a bot is a little sort of artificial intelligence bit of software. And when a student wrote, I have an @ question, the bot would go, ooh, someone's asking a question. And it would start listening to what that question was. And then once the student asked the question, because it's a computer doing that, it would tag the student's tutor. So now the tutor message, oh, one of the students has asked a question. The tutor would then go in, and if another student had answered it correctly, then the tutor would go, that's the correct answer, and tell the bot that that was the correct answer. Or if a student hadn't answered it correctly, then they would jump in and answer it and say, this is the correct answer to that question. And so the bot was now understanding in 2 weeks, 200 topic categorized question and answer pairs around first year engineering. it now understood questions and it understood which were correct answers. Eventually, they allowed helping students find the right answers to things. And they, I've got a question about, how do we, this question says, how do we reference a handout in our lab report? And the answer from the bot is, you can reference this handout or article or website. The main thing to do is, and then it would go ahead and tell them, or it would take them to an article, or it will refer them to a previous question. And it was starting to do some of the simple question and answer stuff. Engineering is a very paper and pen heavy activity. So he printed these worksheets with a QR code on the top, so the technology would know, because what students would do at university is sometimes they don't have a mobile phone. And so they would be using Teams on their mobile phone and just take a photo of their physical piece of paper and go, I can't do this question. And it would be a photograph. And so now with the QR code, the artificial intelligence was able to read the QR code and then produce a response to exactly the right question, because it understood which question the student was talking about. And then the last thing they did also was the AI system would even go back to the videos of the lectures in Stream, which is part of Office 365. Every video can be transcribed with the written word of what was being said at the time. The artificial intelligence bot would even go and search those. And if a student said, I've got a question about what the second law, Newton's second law is, instead of giving them the answer, the bot would say, it's at minute 8 in lecture 4. Go and watch it. Here's a link. And so this artificial intelligence stuff was pretty cool, but not the coolest thing he did. He then did some pretty amazing stuff where, just down here, he basically taught the computer to understand all the different content. This is called machine learning. All the different content for first year engineering at lots of different levels of ability. This is kind of a moderate understanding of that concept. Here's a bit better. If a student's really nailing it, it looks like this. And so then they applied an algorithm, a series of steps, and basically what they were able to do was using 2016 data. So the students before this time, actually this was in 2018, so it was 2017 data. They had all of the data out of the systems and they had those students' end results. And so in 2018, they were able to train this model looking at the 2017 student cohort, where it understood what exam results all of the students did. And they had this massive set of data that said these kinds of behaviors matched up to this kind of result. And what they were able to do was produce 500 individual personalized study guides for every single student 2 weeks prior to the exam, automated. Now, I couldn't do that for 25 year 12 psychology students when I was teaching, let alone a cohort of 500. Not all learning is about exams, I get it, but it's a little indication of what happens when someone, amazing educator, gets hold of this technology and does something pretty cool. Did it actually work? His first year exam pass rate in engineering went from 65 to 85% as a result of the support that they were given through this system. Not only because they felt a part of a learning community by using the team stuff, but also the individual study packs helped that said, if you study these 10 questions, I can see you're going to stuff them up. Study these 10 questions really well, you'll do a great job. Now, the reason that I tell you that story, because it's pretty highfalutin, he's a pretty amazing dude. It's not something you're going to produce in your school. But it's certainly something that Microsoft are looking to build in functionality like that into our platforms. And so that, every school or every university should have the possibility of doing that kind of stuff without some amazing dude called David Kellerman working there. And so we're starting to build that sort of stuff into our technology. And so switching gears now down quite a way down to what does this technology look like? What do we actually use in the school and how do we do it? Well, it's kind of this bit of the education transformation framework. This is where David Kellerman was playing in advanced analytics and artificial intelligence, but he was also creating a student-centered learning environment by allowing all of his students to be leaders of asking questions and answering each other's questions. He was also doing a fair bit of stuff around, what was the other one I was going to talk about? Equity inclusion, because there were students who were now included in conversations they otherwise wouldn't have been. There was an amazing amount of work being done in that space. But let's just focus on this bit, hybrid learning. I put this up before. It's the definition of how do we create an environment where the best of face-to-face learning done by great practitioners is real, but also there's a technology layer in their school that allows them to do different stuff they might not have been able to do before. For example, I'm teaching in a classroom. I want my kids to do some group work. I just need 5 collaborative Word documents to make this happen. Now, in a Teams environment, I can easily just set up document 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and just say to the kids, right, go into this folder, open that document. You guys are working on document 1, your document 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's set up in 20 seconds, and the kids are now collaborating live while they're brainstorming, ideating, doing whatever they're doing. And so when we think about what we're trying to do here, we're trying to sort of solve heaps of challenges with technology in the classroom by making a simple sort of hub of to connect all of our technology bits together. And schools have a very different view of what's important around technology, and your IT teams will as well. Whatever we do, we're going to integrate it with other systems, and we have to fit it within budget, and it's got to be private, and all those things are really important. And students got a different view. They just want to be able to work with other kids, and they just want to work with their teachers, and they want to access everything from school and home, and they want to do it on every device, and they want to be able to collaborate easily. And teachers want to inspire kids to do new things, and they want to save themselves some time because teaching's hard, and do less tech management, more teaching, and they want to use a variety of strategies. And so this platform, the Office 365 platform underpinning that, is one way to kind of do it. Just to tell you what that kind of is, we talk about Office 365, and the reason that your schools are in this program is because you've got this stuff, you've got this technology, it's all there for you to use for all your teachers and all your students, and it's just about making sure that we can sort of help you go, this is probably the best way to use it. And it's not just today, it's the whole 5 days of PD that you'll get exposed to across your school. But Office 365 includes Word in the cloud and Word on your computer and Excel and PowerPoint and Forms and Sway and la. It's all this stuff, but it's now cloud enabled, which means that you can edit stuff together really easily, and you can collaborate. And if you go to office.com and log in, you see this page, log in with your school details, see this page, and you can see all your stuff sitting there in the cloud, but it's all a bit sort of confusing. This slide's really important. As a school, often what happens is that you have a BYOD computer policy for kids. Bring your own device. Now, there are lots of different definitions of bring your own device, and I don't have time to go down that wormhole. But basically, if parents are asked to go out and buy a computer from JB Hi-Fi or Harvey Norman or wherever, often the people in the shop will say, oh, you need Office. Buy this extra Office 365 card that'll cost you. No kid should be doing that in your school. Every student in your school gets 5 free copies of Office to install on their Mac, on their PC, on their iPad, on their mum's computer versus their dad's computer, because they're separated, there's 5. So no student in this country should be paying money to buy Office down at the shop. And if you could tell your kids that and save your family some money, you'll be like a hero. Now, that can be managed out of your IT team understanding that and, are in control of the devices and putting Office on there. That's one way to do it. Or if the kids are just coming with a computer that is your recommended computer or recommended specifications from down at the shop, then they just need to go to office.com as little Johnny from your school and log in and go install Office. They've got it for free. They don't need to buy it. And so do all of your teachers. So all of your teachers have got multiple copies too. So if you've got you've got your school laptop you work on, but you've also got a home computer, well, put a copy on your home computer. That's cool. You've actually got 5 as well. Office 365 includes Word on the desktop, in the cloud, on your mobile phone and everywhere. Excel, same thing. Now, some of you are going to be, business managers or use spreadsheets a lot. You'll probably use the desktop version, which is the one that the actual installed version. But some students doing okay, kids, here's a collaborative spreadsheet. Add your data into column 4. They can just do that in a browser. They're not doing pivot tables or heavy things. So you've got the benefit of both of those worlds. PowerPoint in the cloud or on the desktop. OneNote is a great note-taking tool. You can use it in the browser, or you can use it on a Windows 10 PC. Forms is brilliant for doing surveys, secure surveys, parent surveys, teacher surveys to kids creating forms to poll their other students on stuff. Sway is a great tool to allow kids to create web content without having to be a coder. Great presentations really easily, and some schools use this for their school newsletters. We know that there are some things we often see if schools aren't using their Office 365 to its potential. If teachers or leaders, I'm looking at all of you, are emailing documents around to each other for someone else to edit and send back to you, it's not 1995 anymore. Old school. If you're using Office 365 well, then you send them a link and they edit it with you, because that's the power of cloud computing. That's the power of Office 365. If the faculty documents or your year 4 team at school, if the year 4 leader has all of their documents saved on their personal computer, which could die at any moment, then you're not using this properly. You as a school leadership team should not be at risk of any of your teachers losing any files, which is your intellectual property and the department's intellectual property, if someone's computer dies. And so there's a thing called OneDrive. We can put it in Teams, but all of these files should be stored in a place that is not going to be impacted if a computer dies. We saw this during the pandemic. If meetings are only able to be attended by people who are face-to-face, then you've got it wrong. There's more potential here. For example, it seems to be a bit of a done thing in other industries that you can join meetings when you're not physically in the same space. But pre-COVID in education, it was kind of like, well, if you can't come to the science meeting, you need to help tell the head of science, and that's not a very good thing. But if someone has to go to a medical appointment with their son or daughter or whatever, why can't they join it via Teams if you can do it both ways? Rather than have an employee now not connected. So there's ways that we can think differently about this. I know that my wife's school are doing they're in Melbourne, so they're all back on deck. All the students are back there. They're doing parent-teacher interviews in a couple of weeks via Teams this year. They're not doing it face-to-face. Now, probably because Melbourne's a little volatile and we could go into lockdown at any time, but there was also some real gains by doing it on Teams. There were parents they'd never seen before who could just dial in for a 10-minute chat. There are parents who are on the road working somewhere else. There are parents, bringing sort of families in to have that chat was able to be done very easily. If students are confused about how to learn in your classroom versus the teacher next door's classroom, then that's not very good for them. And there's research to show that students experience increased in cognitive load, extraneous cognitive load, which is not focused on history or the maths or the literacy or whatever they're working on at the time, but worrying about how do I learn in your class? Because I've just come from Mr. Johnson's class and it's completely different. You want consistency across your school to make sure that all the teachers know how to do stuff and all the students understand how to learn. Anyway, we could go on. There's lots of possibilities, but I want to talk about this. This is Teams, and in your chat window, in your Teams window, there's a little sort of hand up icon. Can you just give me a thumbs up in there if you're using Teams at your school already? It's across the top of your screen, I think. It's like a little face with a hand. And then if you drop it down, there's a little thumbs up. Give me a little thumbs up. Okay, so people are raising their hand. That's cool. So I can see that there are some people, there's a lot of people on the call, but there are some people who are using Teams already in their school. You can put your hand back down if you've put your hand up. Okay, so there's some people starting to use this. Here's the way I kind of describe what Microsoft Teams is. You saw what David Kellerman did it by pulling all that together. If there's this view of what Office 365 looks like with all this stuff, here's kind of the way that you might use it. Teams can be the central point which allows you to store your faculty files, store your Year 3 documents, have your collaborative OneNotes, have your Word docs, and store it all together in there. And when we think about that environment, and remember, your teachers will be doing a lot of work on this, so you don't have to be the gurus in it. There are some ways that you can use Teams to help organize your school. One way is for staff-to-staff collaboration. And I'll show you some examples. I'm going to open up a demo environment in a sec and show you. Staff-to-staff collaboration. Now that might be, we've got an all-staff team. An all-staff team looks very different in a primary school to a secondary school. Because in a primary school, you may only have 30 staff or something. And you might have, a channel for the year 1 team and a channel for the year 2 team and a channel for the year 3 team. If you don't know what channels are, I'll show you in a sec. Whereas in a secondary environment, school of 2000, like I taught in, you can't have a channel for every subject in a secondary school. There probably needs to be different teams set up. But staff-to-staff collaboration is one of the great ways to use teams. You might even start with that before you get involved in classroom teams for kids. But Teams is a great place to deliver that hybrid learning experience. So that my students walk into year 7 history, we're going to a year 7 history team, and everything we need is there. And I'll show you some examples of that. There's also a possibility of using it to streamline communications with your community. For example, depending on what department you're in, or if you're an independent school or whatever, it is possible to have your teams in your school. You can add guest emails in. Because let's face it, right? You're on a Teams call inside the Microsoft environment at the moment. So we're collaborating together, even though you don't have a Microsoft account in the company. And you could do the same thing for the parent-teacher example I spoke about, or maybe it's the Parents and Friends Association, or maybe it's the school board meetings that you have, or the school council meetings. There are lots of ways to sort of have parts of the community come in. Your teachers will be exposed to this kind of idea. You don't have to worry about it, right? It's like, if we're using Office 365 just sort of getting started, we might start with these kinds of things. If we're getting a bit more advanced, then you might see that we're starting to use OneDrive a bit, we're starting to use Forms a bit for some formative assessment, and then the schools are way up this end who are just like, we've got Teams all over the place, all our kids are doing amazing learning, we've got Minecraft going, all that sort of stuff. So there are entry points along the way for each of them. If I think about a team as a collaborative learning platform, here's some of the things you can do in it. You can have files that allow all the students to collaborate together, or 4 or 5 students. And it's interesting because you've probably seen the John Hattie research from years ago now, the meta-analysis of meta-analyses, and love it or hate it. But one of the things that the findings said was that homework actually doesn't have a very big effect size. I wonder whether it's homework per se, or whether it's the kind of homework I used to give my kids, which was, oh, you can't together now at home, so finish these 3 questions, or do this thing in isolation. But if you're working in an English classroom or a literacy classroom, and you've got the kids writing a modern interpretation of Macbeth or something in year 10, why can't the kids now do that online at home together? If you've got a hybrid learning, face-to-face plus digital, it's really easy to do. And homework around that would probably be more impactful than the 6 questions about Macbeth. And so there are ways that we can use collaborative files. We can add other learning software in there, and I'll show you what that looks like in a sec. There's kind of like a mini learning management system in there too. So you can track students' progress. You can gather responses from them with polls and forms built in. You can post assignments and the students will get a notification and they have to hand their file in, and it manages the workflow of feedback if you're using it as an LMS. Great for primary schools who don't need a full-blown LMS but just want some basic functionality, for example. You can host and record virtual classes. Hopefully we don't have to do that anymore. But what it means is it's very easy to bring experts back into your classrooms. The hardest part about bringing an expert from the field into your kids' classrooms is time zones. Because it's other than that, the technology exists. It's not that hard. And so if you've got a virtual class, or a Teams environment like this, pretty easy to send them a link and say, right, we've got Professor such and such coming in, or we've got a person who's a lawyer coming in to talk to our legal students or whatever. And chat and conversations with kids, all of that in the one environment. So what I'm going to do is show you what that looks like in case you've not sort of seen it. So I can see a few people's faces. So just give me a nod if you can now see something that looks a little bit different. Yes, See something different? Good. Okay. So let me just take you on a bit of a tour of this for people who, remember, you don't have to be the expert in this. For people who sort of don't know what Teams is or how would I structure it at school or whatever. Teams is a collaborative hub which allows you to have groups of a team for different purposes in your school. Now, this is a demo environment. It's made up. I'm logged in as someone called Mary Wilson here. And we've got our Fred Bloggs College master team, which might be the place where the leadership team of the school might manage, you know, things like our learning data and our policies and all of that sort of stuff. So it's all staff and it's only staff. You can see here that this teacher is not only a member of the master team because she's a member of our college community, she also teaches Year 7 science, Year 9 maths. She's a member of the science faculty and the maths faculty. And she's also a part of a professional learning community on flipped learning that she's working on at the moment. This was a demo for a district-wide, and some of you in some states will be part of learning communities that happen across a whole Department of Education, like New South Wales, for example. But this might be a STEM champions team with a teacher from every one of the 200 schools in your area. And it's 200 STEM teachers collaborating together and working together. And they might also be on the school council. So what does this look like for learning? And by the way, I'm going to give you a template shortly, so you a template that if you haven't started structuring teams up, can help you do that thinking of how should we set these up? What do I need to name stuff and all that sort of thing. But remember, your teachers will be doing 2 days pretty deep on all this stuff. So lean on them as the expert when you come back together and go, we need to move this stuff forward. So what you can see here in this team, this is a Year 7 science class. And this is me, well, it's not me, it's Mary, and her 25 or 26 learners. Similarly, this could be our Year 4 team with Year 4 S for Smith, or whatever, however you name your classes in primary school. The channels, which are these guys down the left-hand side, in a secondary context, I would name them the topics of what we're about to study. So brain structure. Okay, now everything we see under this channel here is now about brain structure. All of our conversations are about brain structure. All of our files under the little files tab are about brain structure. Everything we do in this space is now about brain structure. Okay. One of the other things that we can see, if I go back to my general channel, across the top, is I've got our class files set up here for all of our learning as a class under files. Here I've got some group projects that we were doing. I've got some rubrics and outlines. This is a place for me to locate files that I want the students to see and the students to use in their learning. This one here, this is very small, but there's a little lock on the class materials folder. And that's where you can put stuff that you just want kids to see, but you don't want them to edit. So your curriculum files you might put in there and say, go to class materials and go to the brain structure folder and grab that document out of there if you want them to do something with it. Across the top further, there's our OneNote notebook, which is kind of like our writing paper. I'll talk about that later on. As a teacher, I see assignments, and assignments is where I can start doing learning management system-y stuff. So if I want to set a task for students and I want them to start working on an assignment. So let me just show you what it looks like to start a new one. I'm the teacher, only I see this. I'm going to create a new assignment. It might be just that I want to collect the students' stories they've written, right? That could be all it is. So let's say it's a creative story. Enter instructions, and I'll just go, please make sure that you hand your blah, blah, blah in here. If I want to give the kids any resources for this assignment, like a worksheet, a handout, a template, or something else, I can give them stuff that way. If I've got a rubric, I can add a rubric in. Now, there are several ways I can add a rubric. I can either upload one, or I can actually make one within Teams. So it's got a rubric creator in it. So if I go add a rubric, you can see I've got one there. but this is a rubric creator inside of, and you can see I can add my different columns here, different descriptions, you get the idea. So I could build that rubric. Once we've built it once within the school, all the other teachers could use that rubric too. So I make my rubric, I set a due time, 11:59 on Wednesday, the 3rd of March, and I just go assign. All the students in my class will now get a notification that says, Mr. Smith sent you something, you've got an assignment due, you've got a task due. And so that creative story task, when they log in, they will then be able to just hand their little assignment in to me, and then I can manage the marking of it. What does marking look like? Here's one I created earlier. This is a house design building challenge where we might have used Minecraft. One student only's handed it in. My fake kids are very slack. And so what this student handed in was not a story or a picture or whatever. It was actually a 3-dimensional Minecraft model. So they've went into Minecraft and they built whatever they needed to build, and they can actually hand in a 3-dimensional model in Minecraft. So that's loading. I'm not sure why it's taking a while, but here it comes. So this is their model that they created, and with my mouse I can drag around and have a look at that model. I'm sure that's not working beautifully for you at your end, but I can then sort of say, hey, give them some feedback, give them some points if it's scored, move on to the next student up here if I want to mark the next kid. So it then allows me to go and have a look at my grade book. So it's kind of like learning management system built in. I think you get the idea. And so the other thing that I'll say about Teams as a learning environment for lots of kids is it's a one-stop place, and I'll show you some examples in a second from a school. It's a one-stop place to organize and structure the kids' learning in one window. Now, we know a lot about cognitive load theory, and we know one of the challenges around technology is when you start clicking on links, you end up with 15 things open. And that is really bad for the learning brain. And so keeping it together is really important. Across the top here, see this little plus? I can add in files or tools I want to use for my teaching. I might just add this in for period or lesson 1 today and then take it off this afternoon. So it's now populating in my demo environment all the different things I've got access to. But let's say, for example, I had a PDF thing that I wanted them to read as a stimulus for an activity. Instead of sending them all the PDF via email or sending them somewhere to find it, I literally could pin it to the top of this screen. And so that's where they see it. If I've got some videos sitting in stream for the science area, I could just pin the videos straight to the top so they know where to find them. If I use Pear Deck in my year 3 class or year 4 class, and the kids all take part in a Pear Deck, which is like an interactive PowerPoint with quizzes and cool stuff, I could put my Pear Deck across the top. And so there's possibility to sort of pin, the best one is this one here, which is websites. Because let's say I'm an English teacher or a literacy teacher, and I just want my students to see the front page of the newspaper today. Then I could just add a website, pin it to the top, and it is the actual web page I want them to see. And all the students see when they come to their team is a new thing here that says today's paper. And I can say to the kids, right, everyone click on today's paper. Let's have a look at this page. They're not opening browsers. They're not going anywhere else. They're not getting confused. So that's a classroom team with some students involved. What about a faculty team? Now, recommendations are that you think about, and I'll give you a template in a sec, you think about naming conventions across your school. How is it really obvious for every teacher that this is a staff-only team, not a student team, for example? I've got little logos there to differentiate between them, but this is the year 7 faculty. Sorry, I haven't got my primary school example up and running. Now, this teacher, and there's not a huge amount of stuff in there, this teacher only teaches year 7 and year 10 science, let's say. So when she comes into the faculty team, staff only for the science department, there are lots of other channels here for all the subjects she doesn't teach. They're still there. They're still synchronizing. It's all good. But she doesn't really care what happens in the year 11 physics channel because she doesn't teach year 11 physics. So she hides those channels, and all she sees is the 2 that are relevant for her. So she teaches year 7 curriculum. They're working on creating a new test together. She goes into year 7 curriculum. And there's a threaded conversation going on here with teachers talking to each other and sharing files. They've got their files organized. They've got their curriculum outline organized. They've got a link to the ACARA website on the top. You know, this is where the teachers work with teachers to collaborate on stuff. And this is where they can do all of their work together. So this isn't a full-blown sort of this session isn't designed for you to go, oh, okay, I could build that. It's really just a toe in the water to show you what sort of a teacher's experience might look like with different sort of purposes for these teams. Let me just jump back to my slides for a sec and just switch to my chat, because I think someone might have popped something in there. By all means, add things into the chat, and if Andrew can answer them, he will.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So let me just move on. There is a really easy PDF guide for people who are starting. It's like literally these are screenshots of a PDF. It's like 10 pages long. It's really easy. If you're starting, it's a nice thing to start printing with printout. If you're doing some design or people are a bit lost with stuff, and that's the link up there, aka.ms/Teams Edu Quick Guide. And it's a really nice, easy guide. I recommend it if you're starting out. Other things, let me show you some examples from a school, because you probably want to see real examples. Actually, just before I do that, remember I told you the crazy story about Dr. David Kellerman and his awesomeness with AI and stuff? Let me show you a little bit of how this stuff is coming into our products. Because we have, former educators and professors and so on working in our education team globally, working on the design of these sorts of features. This was built, this is a school from New South Wales, and this was built, this tool is inside Teams, and it's called Insights. You can see across the top here, they've pinned Insights to the top. And one of the things that we had as a question from educators globally was, if my kids are working remotely, how do I know when they're online and what they're working on? And so it created this timeline for them where they could see when every student was online and what they actually did while they were there. And so in a classroom environment, you might see, this is a fake mocked up one, different points in time where students are accessing files on Teams and what they were working on at the time. It just allows me to sort of see what was going on, so I can go, Jacob hasn't done anything. Now, when you're in a face-to-face environment, it's fine, because you can just walk up to Jacob. If they're working remotely, or if you're truly using this, it's pretty interesting to know whether Jacob's actually opening the assignments. Parent-teacher nights are next week, so I want to see whether Jacob's doing anything. And these kinds of things here are some basic analytics to help a teacher sort of go, get a bit more information about, how many of my assignments have been sending in on time, yada, yada, yada. This is changing, and this is what it's becoming. It's called Insights, and it's free in Teams now. You can just add it into Teams. But it's now getting to a point where you can do things like, Alex Wilbur wasn't active last week. Do I want to message that student? Or 40% of my students seem to be working on their assignments late at night. Or Ella Taylor hasn't even opened the Comedy of Errors task yet. Now that might be due on Wednesday, so I'm a bit worried about that now. So it's allowing insights to be brought to a teacher. It's the tip of the iceberg. Insights to be brought to a teacher to give us some more information to help me to know that I need to tap Ella on the shoulder tomorrow and say, hey, you haven't opened that Comedy of Errors thing. Oh, yeah, I've got to get to that. Well, it's due on Thursday. Let's do it. So it's just giving us some greater insights. Let me show you a couple of examples from an actual school. So this is from a school. These were some remote learning sort of screenshots, but there's a lot on that slide. But just to give you an idea, this is a Year 9 mathematics class with Miss Mitchell. And you can see the kinds of posts that she's using here. For this, please complete those questions. And the kids are thumbs up and responding to things and asking questions in there. It's interesting in terms of what she includes across the top of her teams. For example, they have their weekly planner pinned right there. So no kid can say, oh, I didn't know we had to do that this week. They have their algebra videos, which are the flipped videos that the teachers have recorded for algebra, all organized right across the top. I didn't know where to find the video. Yes, you do. It's one click away right across the top. So the organization of this was pretty cool. I just wanted to call out this one. This is a student that she had who suffered, it was actually in year 12 further mathematics, who suffered from severe anxiety and would not take part in anything either in the classroom or online where anyone else could see. Severe anxiety, really sad. So what she did was created a private channel for just her and that student to communicate during remote learning. And so that's the only place where he would be comfortable enough just talking to Ms. Mitchell about what he needed to do or catching up. Not in the group chat where all the other kids were comfortable adding stuff. He just had to have his own channel. So really interesting use. So we're now at, in a video thing here for Year 9 Maths. And these are actually the classes that she recorded. She taught out of Teams. When she started a lesson like I'm doing right now, she would record her lesson. So if any kid missed it, they could just come back and watch. And she organized them so that the kids would be able to go back and review the lessons. Now, obviously, when you're not in remote learning, these might be little flipped videos, of lessons. When you open one of those up, this is what it looks like. So this is, you can see her teaching down the bottom corner here. And I've blanked out all the kids' names there. But she's actually teaching mathematics here and recording it out so the other students can watch it back later. And she's just writing in a OneNote page because she's got a computer with a pen in it, which we'll talk about after lunch. All of the students at that school needed to have, all the teachers needed to create a weekly planner for their kids. And it's just a curriculum outline. I mean, we all do it all the time, whether it's remote or not. But it's one place where the kids could go to say, what do I have to do? What I'm going to learn this week, whatever. And I've just dropped this down so you can see some of the other things that she had across the top. Polly, for example, is a fun little polling tool to give the kids, let's do some Q&A. Anyway, you get a little bit of a sense there of this one-stop shop in technology land where the Year 9 students would go in and they would be able to do all of their learning associated with Year 9 Maths. Okay. The folder that I shared with you earlier, aka.ms/STP leaders, that folder has this stuff in it. Let me just give you a little bit of a tour before we break for lunch. This is the folder, right? These are the two files we printed out earlier. Eventually the workshop slides, all of my slides will be in here. This afternoon I'll upload them for you. Here, there is a Teams planning template folder. And in there, I'm not going to open these files because I'm going to show you on the slides, are some documents. One is a Word document, which is a blank and editable and allows you and some of your team to sit down and start using it if you want, and two examples. So they are located in Teams planning template folder. What are they? I hear you ask. This is what the template looks like. And basically you work down this way. And so this is a worked example for an English faculty. Okay, so it's a secondary example, but it could be the Year 4 team, or it could be it could be a staff only team of some sort. It could be your leadership team, with you and just the other school leaders in it. So I'll just work down to give you a sense of it. What are we going to call this team? English faculty, great. Who should be the owners of that team? Who's in charge of it? It should be more than one person would be my recommendation. Because if your head of department leaves or is sick for a week or something else happens, you need to have a couple of people who can manage that team. So maybe it's the curriculum lead, maybe it's the head of department, up to you. Who are the members of that team? Who can be part of it? Well, this isn't a student one because it's just faculty, so it's all English teachers. Great. What kind of team is it? And this here, what channels are we going to have? See the blue ones? They're channels. So down the left-hand side. So the English have an admin and meetings channel where they chat about admin and stuff. Don't forget to sort of stationary order or whatever. The Year 7 channel is just for the teachers of Year 7 to talk about Year 7 stuff. Because the Year 11 teacher who doesn't teach Year 7 doesn't want to hear all that stuff in their conversations. And so they separated them out. Now, if you've just got a year 4 team, you probably can do it all in one channel. It's a bit, probably less numbers. The black parts are the folder structure that might fit under each channel. So for example, in year 7, if we just look at this example here, we have a channel for year 7 to do all of our chatting together as teachers of year 7. And then we might have a folder with files about NAPLAN, and a folder about reading, and a folder about writing, and a folder on Mandragora, the text we study, and a folder on debating because we teach that at year 7. So this kind of thing, and you can see I've got some work samples here for you. They're in that folder. If you're starting out with teams to work out how should we structure it, what do we need to think about? We need to have consistent naming conventions. All of that stuff is really important. So with that, I'm going to have a look in the chat window, if I can open it up here, and see if there's anything. Maybe, oh, yes. So there is some conversation going on in there. I'll have a look at that over lunch, but we're going to break for half an hour now, whatever time it is your time. So lunch for my time, but it might not be lunch your time. So have yourself a morning snack if you're in Perth. Keep the questions coming in the chat window. And what we'll do straight after lunch, give you half an hour to sort of marinate on stuff and have a think about it. And then straight after lunch, I'm going to jump into a session around cognitive science behind kind of use of technology in learning. But I'm also going to start with an open mic session where you can ask some questions or whatever for 5 or 10 minutes. Okay? So morning tea time now, or afternoon tea time, or lunchtime, or breakfast time. But half an hour, so I'll see you back here at the top of whatever hour is, unless you're in Adelaide, Northern Territory. Half an hour, you get the idea. So feel free to stay on the call. Just turn your microphone off, which are already off. Turn your camera off if you want, and just leave your computer as it is, and you can go and have a half an hour break. We'll see you soon. I am back. Can you let me know if you can hear me? Just give me a wave. Someone? Anyone?
Can hear you in WA.
Excellent. Thank you. John as well. I think my headset might be a bit crackly. Stephen, is it?
It's sounding okay at the moment, Trav. It
Okay.
was, I mean, you had
Can you let
a
me know?
slight crackle, but it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad.
Let me know, and I'll turn it off and just use my computer. All right.
Yes, Trav, it seemed to get a bit better as the session went on.
Yeah.
Righto. Okay, get me posted. All right, so I said we'd do a bit of Q&A. So I've gone through the chat and had a bit of a look at some stuff. Someone put a great suggestion in there about assignments in Teams and whether or not you can add weightings to assignments. That's a really good call out. Within any of the Microsoft products that you see, there will be an opportunity for you to give feedback. And so if you're in Teams and you're using it and you want that feature, then by all means go in there and add that feedback. Now, it sounds like we're just sort of going, oh, well, that just saves me from telling someone. But literally the way they build education products now is they have the millions and millions of teachers and educators around the world give feedback via the tools, and then it literally creates a list, and then they say which of those things are most popular, and they basically build what's next. So the more sort of people that you get putting that sort of stuff in, the better. But weightings for assignments is a really good one. Some questions in there or comments in there about Teams plus an LMS. Someone mentioned they use Compass a lot, and there's a real balancing act between an LMS and a collaborative platform like Teams, and the sort of different, things you would do in each of those, I suppose. One of the things I have seen, I haven't got the screenshots in this slide deck, is think of Teams and Office 365 as the place where the work gets done, the collaborative documents get done, the files get made, the sharing gets done, the chat gets done. Most people use an LMS more as a place I put on an assessment, the students sit the assessment and it creates a roll book, just sort of like the assignments and grades part of Teams does. You can turn off the assignments and grades part of Microsoft Teams. So you don't have to have that functionality on. So for example, if you're using an LMS at your school, but you want to sort of embed it into Teams, you can do that and turn off the assignments feature within Teams. So that is possible to do. So maybe talk to your IT folks about how they might be able to do that. So you can have a Teams environment, and with that little plus I showed you at the top, you can add in your LMS pages for that subject or whatever you want. Exporting grades out of there, yes, they go out into Excel quite nicely. Parent access to grades is a really good question someone asked, or a comment. Who owns all the data that is collected? You do, Melanie. Good question. So our policy around data is very, very, very strong. So there is no data would ever be accessed by anyone at Microsoft or any third party. It is only, we provide a service for you to use your own data, and that's it. So privacy is very, very important to us. So there's no access of anyone accessing your data. The parent access to grades one was a good question. Like, can parents actually log in? So some LMSs or other tools allow parents to sort of get access into Teams. It's not really there at the moment. Basically, one thing you can do is you can create a sort of Teams, I think it's called a digest, which is like a weekly summary that goes out to a parent to say, here's what little Johnny or Mary has to work on this week in terms of assignments. Not really having parents in to sort of view a set of grades or something. That's not really there at the moment. But we know that's a request, so I think they're working on it. Stream in WA, yeah. So there's some states where things like Microsoft Stream, which is kind of like a private YouTube that's part of Office 365. Some states it's enabled, some it's not. It's kind of a state-by-state decision. So it is possible, but there's always a workaround. So Stephen Payne, who's on the call here, is the Learning Delivery Specialist for WA, so be able to help you with some workarounds. And someone asked a question, Matt asked a question, hi Matt, about the overlay between like Teams and OneDrive and all that sort of stuff. So OneDrive is basically a cloud-based storage folder for you to put your stuff in, personal files. So instead of me using my docs on my computer, which are not backed up, I always put them in my OneDrive, which I can synchronize to my machine. So it's the same as just using any other file storage on my machine. But I know that they're uploaded to the cloud and they're backed up safely. So that's my OneDrive, personal storage of files. Teams files are for you and other members of that team to store files. This is where the history document should be. The year one curriculum document should be. They shouldn't be in someone's private OneDrive. They should actually be in a team space, a collaborative team space, so that everyone can access to them and use them when they want. So OneDrive is more personal. Team structure is more for shared files, like a K drive or a H drive or something you might have at your school at the moment. Are there any others? Something about yeah, Compass functionality for OneNote grading is being removed, or they removed it. Any other questions that you want to put in here? Crystal, have you got a question? Just give me a nod. No? Okay. I thought you were trying to unmute there. So chuck any other questions you might have in a chat, and I'll try and keep an eye on it. Now, so that last little session, that last half an hour or something, was kind of down in the weeds. It was just about the technology stuff, and that's just to give you an idea of what is possible in the environment. But remember, your teachers will be doing a deeper dive into it. Maybe some of you are going as well, but a teacher will be doing a bit of a deeper dive into that sort of stuff and whatever. So they'll be your experts. I wanted to now shift gears a little bit. So I'm just going to unshow my slides and hang on a sec. And reshare in a different screen. So let me just do that. Kathy, just add in the chat, do you mean SharePoint sites? All right, I'm just waiting for this to load up. Okay. So let me share this in. Okay. So just give me a thumbs up, someone who's got their video on, to just let me know when you can see. Oh, quite crackly again. Yeah,
you're a little crackly at the moment.
All right, let me try and switch my headset off and go to normal computer. Okay. All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Much better.
All right. Good. Let's have a chat about this
this is an area of a great passion for me. I assume you can still see my slide. Andrew?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
Yes,
thanks.
yes.
Mate. So this is a great area of passion for me, and it's a conversation around the type of device that we use with learners and the impact of that on learning. So it's a bit of a hobby horse for me. In 2006, which is 15 years ago now, we transitioned all of the students at our school from a traditional laptop to a laptop with a pen in it. And there's a lot of research around why you might do that. And by the way, there's a lot of different types of devices with a pen in them too. And it doesn't have to be a $3,000 uber super duper computer to be able to give you the functionality that allows kids to write, draw, mark up, annotate, and diagram while they're learning in technology. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of this sort of stuff. So one of the things that we often see is that there's this sort of device dilemma. And it might be that, you know, I want a tablet because it's thin and it's light and it's easy on and I can just get my stuff quickly, but I still need a PC or a Mac if I want to do some sort of heavier, gruntier stuff. Full multitasking, you know, big bits of software, full fluency in terms of using all of our systems and stuff. And so then we think about learners, and there's this whole thing here, which is they still need a workbook. And this thing about writing and annotating and diagramming is something that it's a baby we often throw out with the bathwater. And I want to talk a little bit about the role that a device with a stylus plays in making sure that students get the best out of their learning scenarios. And so, you know, bring your own device programs where parents are just told to go and buy anything they want are probably the least impactful technology programs anywhere. Because there's a few problems that are created by that. By the way, I've got a square around this little computer down there because that's the first pen-based computer we rolled out to our kids in 2006. But there's some other old school technology there too. So BYOD means a lot of different things, but at some schools they just say, oh, as long as it's got a screen that lights up that's bigger than 6 inches and a keyboard, we're fine. I actually think that we need to sort of take a bit more of a leadership role in this and have an informed decision about what kind of technology our students bring in, because technology does make a difference to the experience for learners and what they can learn and how they can learn. Now, that doesn't mean it's a criticism of any one bit of technology. So, for example, I mean, there's certain types of technology or types of computers, if you like, that are better for learning than others. Just in the same way, there are shoes that are better for running than others, and there are, you know, flippers are shoes as well, but they're not very good for running or walking in, but they're great for swimming in. It's just sort of horses for courses, right? It's about what am I trying to achieve? And so device actually matters is probably the least cool thing you'll hear all day. And this is for teachers and students because they can make a difference. So what's the science behind this? So I've got a psychology degree, so this might be more exciting for me than it is for you. When difficulty in the stuff you are thinking about or learning about increases, so how hard it is for you, often what happens is we shift to what's called multimodal communication. It's the moment in a meeting where someone cracks it and says, do you mind if I whiteboard this out? Because you're doing something which is better represented in a spatial means than just by taking notes on a Word doc or a notes page or whatever. It's quite common, and the challenge is that traditional clamshell laptops with a keyboard, or even say an iPad without a pen but an on-screen keyboard, the keyboard thing is not a very great thinking tool. And so we need to think about what happens when we are trying to think creatively. This is literally a photograph of an old school whiteboard, as you can see. But when you start thinking, like we were sort of going, well, what are we going to show them? This is like a list of demo stuff. You think that things are going to flow out of your brain into a perfect little organized list. And then the brain goes and all of these things are representations more likely to illustrate the way the human brain works. And so a whiteboard is a much better way to brainstorm something than a Word document. As a matter of fact, the science shows that students will create up to 36% more ideas for when generating hypotheses, for example, when using a pen and paper than they will a keyboard. And so there's something that happens in the human brain when we start to use keyboard-only interfaces and we forget about using this pen and paper or stylus and screen kind of thing. There was a book that was written in 2013 by Professor Sharon Oviatt, and it's called The Design of Future Educational Interfaces. And it's a fully sciencey book. It'll fall on your head at night if you're reading it in bed. But there's a lot of science in there, and all of these areas of science are sort of touched on as illustrating what we know about learning now and what we know about computer design and human interface design and cognitive science and psychology and linguistics and development of language and learning sciences, all of that sort of stuff coming together. And the premise of this book was, if we could start again by designing a computer for learning, what would it look like? What would it afford? What would it allow us to do? And one of the things that we often say is that, this using technology with kids is great because it allows them to, be creative thinkers and also do problem solving and whatever really well. Well, only if you've got a stylus. The opposite is true with a keyboard. Keyboards were originally designed to actually make people faster at inputting stuff. They were never designed as a creative thinking tool. And it's a really bad way to do creative thinking is on a keyboard. So if you do have computers at your school which are keyboard only, they should be the place where the kids go and type up their stories, not ideate what their story is. Because the thinking you do is very different. And let's explore a couple of ideas around that and some of the research in this space. So this is a this is a very secondary based example. So apologies to those primary folks. This was a piece of research that was done in 2014 by Muller and Oppenheimer. And they looked at the notion of using a computer for note taking. And so everyone sat in a big lecture theatre and they were delivered the same content. And there was 3 experimental conditions or groups. The first group were told, take your notes on a keyboard, laptop, just take your notes, which is basically what 95% of students in universities do these days as we travel around. The second group were told, don't use a keyboard or mouse, use a pen and paper to take your notes. That's the longhand group. And the third group were told, you can use a keyboard, but I'm going to give you a hint that we're not giving group 1. And the hint is, don't take verbatim notes. Because the science shows that when people are taking notes with a keyboard, they're almost fast enough to transcribe what is being spoken. They're literally sort of photocopiers of just getting the stuff down, and they're not processing it at all. What they were testing in this study between those 3 groups was the ability to recall the facts of the presentation or the lesson, and the ability to apply those learnings to a new concept or a new idea, so conceptual application. The group who used a keyboard to take notes had decreased ability in both of those areas compared to the other 2. The group who used a pen and paper to take notes had increased factual recall and way increased conceptual application versus the other 2. And if we think about it, it kind of makes sense. One of the things, if you're typing really fast and you can basically transcribe what's being said, then you're not actually processing at all. We know that when you go into a lecture theatre, many of you will remember being there, when the lecturer moves the slide onto the next PowerPoint slide or whatever, you hear this audible groan of people going, oh, I didn't get all of that down. And that's because you can't get it all down. If you're writing by pen, you certainly can't. And so there's something about us slowing down and you're thinking, I need to just get dot points here. It also, no one in this meeting has probably ever gone to the trouble of actually drawing a graph or a diagram when taking notes with a keyboard, which implies that in the note-take process, you don't value that as a useful thing. Or it's just too much of a pain in the bum to do on a keyboard, which is more the truth. And so the ability to sketch down a diagram is actually vastly more important in many instances than the ability to take screeds of handwritten notes. And so the group here who were told, take notes with a keyboard but don't take verbatim notes, had a little bit of improvement in factual recall, but still no ability or a less ability to apply that concept to a new environment. Now, basically what this tells us is that there are differences in the way that the brain processes information based solely on the way that we ask students to process that and write it down or take it down. And a keyboard actually does more harm than good in a note-taking scenario. And so it's either a misapplication of technology, we shouldn't use technology here, or it's having the wrong technology. Now, it's kind of weird for someone from a tech company to say, oh, you shouldn't use technology for that bit. But I would actually advocate for you should use technology in that bit, but it's got to be the right kind of technology, like a piece of technology with a pen in it. And here's some other reasons why. These are some notes from a mate of mine who was studying medicine in Adelaide. And he was a very, very good student, a mature age student, and he would go into the lectures and he would take screeds and screeds of notes. And then what he would do is he'd get the professor's slides, which I realize this kind of student isn't always real in our classrooms. He would get the professor's slides, which were sent out, and he would take the screenshots out of the slides, such as this ECG or whatever it is you can see in the background here. And then he would put that on his OneNote page, which he was using OneNote, which is what I'm presenting out of, and he would then annotate on top of it. So he'd be looking at his original notes, making meaning out of it. And you can see here what they call in the science, and this is getting a bit full on and boring. In the science, they call all of these little markings he's doing, I'm highlighting them in yellow, all these little markings that he's making are called non-linguistic visuospatial markings. And what they are is a representation of the way the human brain is processing this information and making understanding of it. If you can get what Professor Gordon Sanson at Monash University would call the high fidelity content, the structured screenshot of that ECG, and do low fidelity writing over the top of it, you are in the most powerful learning environment for the human brain. Now, the reason that we say doing both of those things is important is because is illustrated in a couple of examples. So here's the first example. One of the things we often do with technology is we talk about e-textbooks. And so these have become a nice way to start getting information from a digital source. I think e-textbooks are better than any physical textbook I had growing up because they do allow you to manipulate stuff. There's links out to videos, there's interactive stuff. I think they're good. The challenge is, how do I note take on here? Where do I annotate? And so in a digital world, so I'm using my Surface here, I've got a little clicker on the end of my pen, which is my eraser. And if I double click that, it'll allow me to take a screenshot of whatever it is and whack it somewhere else. So I'm kind of leveraging a screenshot, putting it into my piece of digital paper called OneNote. And then I'm able to do the low fidelity things that matter around the outside, such as annotating on top of it, putting a diagram next to it, marking it up, all of those things that are associated with deeper levels of processing and learning. As a matter of fact, writing on stuff when you're learning about it is shown to have an increased depth of processing, increased reflection on meaning, and an increased memory performance overall. So, you know, one of the things I often talk about is the fact that I used to teach psychology, is that none of my year 12 students, I always said to them in the first lesson, I said, you will not be selling your year 12 psychology textbook. It'll be so ruined by the time we're finished with it, you won't be selling it. And the reason was that we would be annotating in it the whole time. We would be diagramming in it. We'd be sticking sticky notes in it. We'd be scribbling all over it. Because the challenge with the way the human brain works is that we have different types of memories. We have semantic memories, which are about the meaning of stuff, so the knowledge or the facts. And then we have episodic memories, which are actually much stronger about the stuff you experience, which is why we take kids on excursions and camps and all those, and do science experiments and all that sort of stuff. And so I'd often do an experiment with my year 12 students in psychology and then say to them, read these 3 paragraphs and you write for me why we did that experiment with reference to that bit of content. And what I'm trying to do there with them is to create different types of memory access routes so that when they're in an exam, they can get that back. They have the experience, they've linked it to the semantic knowledge, so there's episodic and semantic, and it's also visual because they're writing on top of the space where they will go back to study. And so when you start exploiting the human memory system really effectively, you can actually get way improved results in terms of memory performance. Anyway, the other reason that this is really crucial, here's a non-technology example. I often talk about the process of writing, annotating, marking up stuff as really important in the learning process. Imagine that these 2 bits of paper are given to all of us, and they're just 2 bits of A4 paper, no computers involved. The only and on there is some science stuff, some diagrams and things. and we've got to solve a science problem. We have to work out what's going on here, and there's a science problem associated with it. The only difference is that half of the room, if we were all together, are not allowed to write on it while you think about it. And the other half are allowed to write all over it while you think about it. Who's going to perform better? The group who can mark it up, diagram on it, write on it, who are doing all of these kinds of things you can see here, all of these little dots, all of these lines, all of these notations. This is, once again, an illustration of the human brain trying to unpack all that information and make sense of it. The group who are able to write on top of those pieces of paper performed 24.5% better than the ones who weren't. Now, that's a nice story, but why is it relevant? So I taught in a classroom where students had their own computer for 12 years. And 95% or more of the stuff I would give them to learn from was in a digital format. Go to the portal, download this worksheet, here's a PDF, look at this PowerPoint, go to this website, watch this YouTube video. So it was all digital, 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 digital. And the students didn't have a workbook anymore. And so this study here is clearly showing that if you cannot annotate, mark up, and diagram on top of stuff while you're thinking deeply about it, you'll perform worse. And so we either need to do one of several things. We either need to give them a device where they can write on top of digital stuff, which is kind of like the ultimate way to do it, and there's different price points and whatever to do that. Or we need to go back to the old school of printing more stuff out for kids to write on and stick in somewhere. Because we're kind of in this middle ground now where technology-rich schools without a stylus are basically just saying, oh, it doesn't matter, that's not the way these kids do it anymore. They've done studies that show that there's no difference between 14 and 40-year-olds' brains in terms of the way they process this stuff. So this is not a phenomenon that's going away quickly because kids have grown up with technology. So we need to think about that sort of stuff. If you think about these subjects here, there's one commonality amongst all of these subjects. And the commonality between math, science, physics, chem, music theory, Japanese, Chinese, art, and others is that they have a symbolic language associated with them. None of these subjects are very well taught through a computer with a keyboard. And the reason is that the language associated with learning or expressing your knowledge around the skills of that subject are actually in symbols. And so there's something to be said for us being able to use a piece of technology that allows us to do all of the types of learning we need to do. When we think about what kids do at school, like for learning, what they actually do, here's a start of a list, but this is just out of my head, but there could be another 100 things that kids actually do. They read for understanding, and they write, and they sketch, and they create products, and they synthesize their thinking, and they concept map, and they blah, 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 blah. Everything that's in yellow is better done with a pen or a stylus than a keyboard. And so we have to think about the way that we, for example, reintroduce reading for understanding. You know, like English teachers will tell you to be underlining key words, to be making annotations in the margins. All of those things need to be possible and need to be possible with technology. So your choice of technology does matter. Does it matter for teachers? This is a study from Monash University. It was done in about 2000, so back in the day. And they were looking at the engagement of students when they went to a lecture and the results associated with going to a lecture. Were lectures actually useful for learning? And they actually were seeing quite an alarming decline in the late 90s in engagement and marks or gains in learning associated. And that's pretty worrying. And so they thought, what's changed? Lots of things had changed, but a couple of things that changed were that lecturers started creating their content and delivering it out of Keynote or PowerPoint. And so that's really interesting. Right now, Microsoft obviously own PowerPoint, so why would I be saying that? Because there's really bad ways to use it and there's decent ways to use it. But what it actually did when you present a really bad PowerPoint done badly to students is they become very passively engaged in the content. University students will often say to their lecturers, can you just give us the slides ahead of time so I can take notes alongside them? The research shows that does more harm than good. because what the students do is go, I don't have to really concentrate. I've got all these slides to look back on later. And so they don't truly engage in the storytelling elements of a classroom teacher doing their craft. And so they thought, how can we get this to go back up? And one of the things they did was they gave their lecturers a computer with a pen in it. Well, they were HP computers back in the day. And they said to their lecturers, take 60% of the stuff off your slides and draw it in live, ink it in live. And so they would just decimate their slides, have the skeleton of their slide left, and start writing and drawing and annotating their slides back in. Did it make a difference? 80 to 90% of students, when surveyed, preferred the lecturers who did it that way. 80% of students said it helped with their focus, and 85% of students said the teacher annotating on something helped with their understanding. And so the lesson here is that teachers should ink on stuff. We know the value of a whiteboard marker and a whiteboard, right? We know the value of it. You can do that now digitally speaking. This, just to let you under the hood a little bit here, this is just a big piece of paper I'm writing on. See, I've been sort of just zooming around here. This bit of paper is actually just sitting in a OneNote notebook. So it's just a big piece of digital paper that I've kind of moving around. And it's just got screenshots on it from slides and stuff, but it allows me to easily write on it and take you on a bit of a journey. You know, teaching, the origins of teaching is actually storytelling. And so this sort of technology allows me to sort of tell some stories while I'm going and link concepts together in a sort of more visual way. Let me show you some curriculum examples of using stylus-enabled technology. This is a mathematics worksheet. And so I don't know whether you can see that, but there's sort of a dotted line around part of that. That's an A4 worksheet for whatever level maths this is. Might be year 8 maths or year 7 maths or year 6 maths or something. But there's a worksheet. And you can see around the side here that the student has been working on that and moving around the place and whatever. Let's say, for example, the teacher realizes that at this point here is where they don't understand something. And so there might be a need for a teacher to give a little bit of feedback at this stage, or to get the student to think differently about something that they've done. So one of the things a teacher might do in this environment is go, they're sitting at home, they're doing their marking, is go onto YouTube and find a maths teacher who's teaching volume of a cylinder, because I've taught it to them once, or at least I thought I had, and they didn't really get it. So here's a video just off YouTube. Notice that, I'm just going to grab the link. It'll have an ad on the start of it, which you can skip after 5 seconds.
Grammarly does more than
I'm not going to worry about. Not going to worry about the ad at all. I've just grabbed the link to that video. I'll just move that over. And I'm just going to paste the link to that video straight onto the piece of paper. And what you'll notice is that that video is now sitting literally in the piece of mathematics paper. So it's still on YouTube. It's still a mathhelp.com video, but it is now sitting right next to where the student had the problem with their bit of mathematics. And so what that means is that now I've got a few things that are happening here. First of all, the feedback that I give them is not just a link, it's the actual video, so they can just press play right there. It also means that the student could take some notes right alongside it and firm up their understanding by watching that video or rewriting the formula or whatever I ask them to do. But really the key to the secret to this is that it's reducing cognitive load. The student is not going anywhere else, getting lost anywhere else, having to think about multiple things to try and get their understanding of mathematics right. I've got an area here I need to give feedback. I could record a video, I could record some audio, I could take some notes with hand, I could type some stuff, I can put in some hyperlinks, I could put in a link to another practice document, I could do whatever I wanted on this digital paper. And it's really, really impactful. So I don't have time to show you any other examples, but there's a myriad of examples of the ways that sort of digital paper works. One of the things that we do think about with teachers is that, you know, there's ways that teachers can use technology really, really impactfully for the thing called teaching. And for example, one of the things that this kind of technology allows me to do is reharness storytelling. Because I'm in a fluent environment where a student asks me a question, I can just push across the side here and right over here. You know, I've got some possibilities of dragging some stuff in. It's just a fluent way to go, but it's also using technology so I can get video and audio and all that stuff in. One of the things that you've seen me doing a lot is what I call distraction recovery. You know, in every presentation you've ever sat in or any lesson, you daydream and you just drift off for 30 seconds going, oh, that's very interesting. And then you come back and you go, oh, where are they up to now? I always use signposting by focusing student attention on what it is that I'm actually teaching at a time. It's just like teaching 101. It's just to say, focus on this bit. The flexibility of being able to input stuff anywhere is really, really rich and helpful. But maybe the way this guy is actually presenting whatever that bit of chemistry I don't understand is, maybe that's actually just the best way to teach that stuff. And so he's doing it on a blackboard with chalk there. He could equally do it on a OneNote page with ink. But the idea here is that there is a possibility of us doing every different type of teaching, which is right for every different type of environment and every different type of learner. If it's auditory or it's visual or it's mathematics notation or it's chemistry notation, or if it's literacy development, there's huge amounts of possibilities for us to use this technology in this way. So with that, you know, here's my mantra. Now, I mean, you might, you know, think I'm a bit of an idiot for saying this sort of stuff, but if I was going back into a school now and starting up a technology program, I would be making sure that we got a no compromise technology experience for kids. And what that means to me is there is no compromise. If they want to write, they can write. If they need to type, they type. If they want to watch video, they can. If they want to do, you know, full software, great. If they want to do apps, they can. It's got to be no compromise, because you've got creative teachers in your school who want to leverage that technology in amazing ways, and you need to sort of make sure that you've got a platform that allows for all of that to occur. And so, as I said at the start, this is kind of a real area of interest for me, because I think that the wrong technology in learning environments can actually be quite detrimental to the learning development of students. So with that, I'll have a look at the chat and see if there's any comments or whatever in there. But I think it's something that we should consider as school leaders. As I said earlier, I'm not a big fan of just saying to parents, oh, just go out and buy whatever you want and bring it in, because it means there's a race to the bottom in terms of functionality of those devices. What that means is I am not going to be able to exploit the full functionality of a computer if not everyone in the class has an equally capable environment. In other words, if someone rocks in with some sort of a Android tablet for $70 from Aldi and another kid's got a full-blown Surface Pro or whatever, I'm not going to disadvantage the kid with the Aldi thing. I'm just going to make sure that the kid who's got the Surface device does less with it so it's equal to the lowest common denominator in the classroom. Teachers will not disadvantage kids based on technology choice. And so therefore, I think we should be, as school leaders, standing up and saying, hey, here's the minimum specifications, the minimum capabilities that we will accept into our classrooms. And when I say that, I'm not really very excited about people saying, oh, it's got to have an i5 processor and it's got to have 8 gig of RAM and it's got to have whatever. To be honest, if I was in a classroom environment today and that kid's got an i7 something and they've got an i5, couldn't give a crap. But I want everyone to have the same device capability. I want everyone in my room to be able to learn in the same way so that I can exploit their computer to help them with their understanding of whatever it is I'm teaching. And so that might mean touch, stylus, and maybe some minimum specs. But I'm more interested in the capability of those computers to help learning than I am than just nuts and bolts of it. So with that, I shall get off my high horse about this topic. I just think it's very, important. And I think the oh, don't worry about it, students will make the right choice is not really the answer. Now, someone's written a question. Thank you, someone, David, I think it was, has written a question about research. Let me just show you this for a sec. So in our folder of goodies here, you'll see research and resources as a sub part of that folder. That in there is a whole raft of research around this area. So if you're as a school are going to put a stake in the ground and say, we're going to have stylus-enabled devices for our students at whatever year level, this bottom paper here by Sharon Oviatt is actually a synthesis of some of the research that I just presented, but put into a 10-page format rather than a 300-page science book. So it talks about interface design. It talks about, you know, some of the research behind thinking. It pulls out some of that's taking a long time to load. Pulls out some of the key points that you might be able to use to talk to staff or to talk to parents with, so they understand what the research is behind that sort of decision. So in this research and resources folder, there are lots and lots of pieces of research here that might be useful. Let me pick out a couple of others which aren't necessarily related to the same topic, but while I'm here. This one at the top here called 5 Phases of One-to-One. If you're just rolling out a technology program for the first time, this document is sort of 5 phases to get right. You know, do your research, set a vision for what you want to achieve, da-da-da-da. It's built off what Bruce Dixon created 20 years ago called 21 Steps to 21st Century Learning. Step 19 was to buy computers. There are 18 steps before that to get right. Engaging the supportive community. You know, we at our school used to have, 400 parents come to our school hall for our one-to-one program, and they were paying for the computer. And we would then talk to them about the research, the science behind why were we doing this? Why is it good for kids' brains? You know, all that sort of stuff. Future skills, all those things. And bringing the community on the journey. That school that I taught at, Frankston High School, which is in a low to middle socioeconomic area of Melbourne, 98% of students bring a Surface Pro computer to school every day, completely parent funded. And that's because they understand the value of this for learning. So this is, this is a sort of big area for me. But anyway, there's research in there about one-to-one. There's lots of stuff in there that might be useful for you moving forward. Any other questions or comments? I'm just having a look at the chat. That's good to hear, Ben. I have a tub of styluses. The value of a stylus is huge in terms of what it can do for learning, but they add some layers of complexity because kids are kids, right? And so I get it that sometimes it's a bit annoying. You know, if kids are using them more, they're less likely to use them, but that's not really a great argument because they use their $200 pair of sneakers for PE and they lose them as well. You know, so I get the fact that this is really valuable when teachers ask students to use it effectively, but it can cause some other problems. Okay, so I'm gonna move on because I want to talk to you about some other stuff. So let me stop sharing my screen and share my other one back in. Any other questions or whatever, then feel free to chuck them in the chat. And if I don't get to them now, I can follow up later on. Let me share this back in. I want to talk to you and flip to our last section before you need to do some thinking and forward planning. And that is about accessibility and making sure that all learners have the opportunity to learn effectively, and also that there are ways that technology can help emerging readers, for example, and in lots of other areas too. So let me just start this slide up. And this will be the last section of content before we give you some time to do some thinking. And we get our sticky notes back out, which hopefully you've still got handy. All right. So can you see that? Thumbs up from maybe the guys at Mandiri Secondary College. Can you see that? Yep, thank you, Jessica. So let's talk about this inclusive classroom stuff. This is the way that the technology that you have available to you can help support every student to achieve more in their learning. So this is actually legitimately our mission as Microsoft. That's our CEO, who has one profoundly disabled child and another who has learning disabilities. And he grew up in the slums of Calcutta, I think. And his name's Satya Nadella, and he's a brilliant, brilliant brain. And this is the vision that he started, and that's him in a classroom talking with kids. Every single person in our organization has to have a link to education because he thinks it's the thing that will enable countries globally to thrive. And the mission is to empower every person in the organization, in every organization on the planet to achieve more. And by every person, we mean every person. And sometimes equity is more important than equality. Sometimes some people need a bit more of a boost up than others. And equality is not, is not as useful when you see that diagram on the right-hand side. So how do we think about that, and how do we design for that at Microsoft? I'm going to show you some technologies that you've got that you could use with your kids at your school and your parent communities as well. When we think about accessibility, we think about it in lots of different ways. We're going to focus on just some of these today, but we have, we think about obviously what happens when people can't use a Windows computer because they don't have fingers, or, can they voice control it? How do they set up a PC? All that sort of level of stuff, as well as things around learning. In terms of learning, we focus on reading support, writing, mathematics, and speaking and listening. And so I'm going to show you 3 different demos of stuff that you could start to use that you've got within that Office 365 environment at the moment. One of the things that Microsoft employees do or can do is take basically a week off work to work on something they want to build. And so it's called a hackathon. And globally, there's these hackathons that happen. And in 2015, this team won a hackathon by creating something called Immersive Reader. The reason that they designed it was that one of the guys who came up with the idea had a nephew who was dyslexic. And he said, our technology has got to be able to help someone who can't read very well to get better at it. Or at the very least, our technology should help them have access to the written word, which they don't have access to now. Now, this is very close to my heart because my dad is profoundly dyslexic. And I remember being at high school and early years of university, and my dad would be sitting in a room with a tutor trying to teach him how to read. So dyslexia is something that's kind of close to my heart. So this tool called Immersive Reader that they built during that hackathon experience, and they made and they embedded it into a product, is a pretty cool tool. And I'm going to show you what it looks like once I can drive my computer. All right. I'm going to show you in OneNote, okay? But it doesn't need to be in OneNote for this to work. But I'm just going to show you in OneNote. So here is just some text, okay? It's actually from that paper from before, but it's just some text. And one of the things that we can do is in OneNote, in Word, in PowerPoint now, in the browser, is we can use this thing called Immersive Reader. And this is something you teach the kids about, and it's something that your teachers will know about, and in the accessibility day, they'll go through these features a lot more deeply, and they will also know about. I'm just going to click on Immersive Reader, okay? And one of the things you'll notice is that it will just change the view of my screen. I'm still in OneNote, but things will look a little bit different. And what will happen is that it will take away some of the distractions, the menus. My computer is running very poorly. And it will allow me to sort of see things in a different way. This is the same piece of text in the same document. One of the things I can do is I can change some text preferences. By the way, a student would set this up once on their computer, and it will remember these settings for them in every other document they ever open this way. If a student does have dyslexia, then this is much worse than this. Spacing between the letters, the words, and the lines is actually hugely beneficial for someone who suffers from dyslexia or visual crowding. I actually suffer from visual crowding. That's a bit of a nightmare for me. But that is much better for me. The slider here to allow us to increase and decrease the font size. Colors, because we know that sometimes, there are different colors for different kinds of visual impairments. You know that there are sort of dyslexic fonts save you money because research is being done to say these kinds of fonts here are just equally as useful. Basic fonts with a clear line that you can run your eye along the bottom of are useful fonts. They've even got Comic Sans here, which I don't call a font, but some people do. Then we've got other things I can do, like have it read out.
As technology increasingly permeates schools and our lives, one major concern is students' vulnerability to illusions about the perceived benefits of...
Right, so some pretty complex words in there. I might like to have that read to me. I can change the voice, I can change the speed, I can change it to an Australian accent, I can do all of that sort of stuff. Other things I can do, I can put syllables on. And so, teaching kids about syllables is kind of an abstract concept when they're little kids. But you can see here that putting the dots in between the words might help little kids to be able to break that up and chunk it. You can turn on nouns. Now, this is a piece of text that that it won't have seen before, but it pulls out the nouns, pulls out the verbs, and I can color code those if I want to, and allow it to sort of have verbs in green because they're action words or whatever. And I can even put labels on. So it can show me all the nouns and the verbs with a little symbol above it. The other thing I can do as well is put on line focus. And so line focus allows me to get pretty seriously blocking out lots of competing information and just having that line focus put on. Second last thing I'll show you is, I'll turn the line focus off, is this picture dictionary here. And so if I go to a word, it'll allow me to hear that word.
Results.
If I go to, so this is managed by, I think it's called Picture Board, I think it's called, but this is a standard for lots of sort of visual cue software that is used. So it will basically allow me to see a little picture and hear the word spoken.
Chapter.
For any word that I click on that has got something in the board maker technology. The last thing I could do is if you've got students at your school who speak another language more fluently, or let's say mum and dad do, and I know a lot of schools have a lot of students coming from other countries, maybe international school programs, for example. You can even use translation into other languages. So if I go, I want to translate something into German by word, if I choose chapter again, it will allow me to hear it in English.
Chapter.
Hear it in German.
Kapitel.
If I want to translate the entire document, then this is that document in German, and this is what it sounds like.
Da Technologie zunehmend Schulen und unser Leben durchdringt, ist ein groß...
Now, you might be thinking, well, why would a student want to do that? Well, my wife teaches mathematics at year 12, and some of the students she has, international students, very successful school. Some of the students she has are international students who are newly arrived, from China, let's say, can't understand her basic classroom instructions, let alone the content that is printed on sheets. They seem to do quite well in mathematics, but there is a real challenge with language. So the ability for them to be able to use this to translate things is really important. Now, the secret to this whole thing is if I just push this back button, I'm back into my normal document. All we've done is change the view. Every single kid could benefit from having that, but certainly those who have challenges around reading or around speed of reading. And there's lots and lots of scientific studies about the impact of this on kids. We see this study here was done looking at 4th grade and 6th to 8th and 10 to 12th grade students and the amount of learning gains that they were having by using this technology. And it's something that we, globally, we're very closely aligned with Made by Dyslexia. And in Australia, we partner with Code Red, who you may have heard about. Let me show you some other examples. The next one is kind of cool because I'm just checking whether there's anything in the chat there. Which is kind of interesting. I'll show you in the browser. But sometimes there's situations, a lot of times there's situations where students, reading for them is not the problem. Getting information out of their brain onto paper is where the challenge lies. So let me show you about dictation. But before I do, I just want to show you, this is a piece of a Word doc. It's sitting in Word Online. And by the way, immersive reader's in here as well if I wanted to have that read to me. But I'm going to go to Editor. And Editor is built into Word Online. And this, teachers will love this. So there's check for similarities online. It's kind of like a plagiarism checker built into Word now. And it'll check online, see if it's found that text anywhere. And you can see I've done it before because it's already found that there are similarities. But it will pop up something that says, oh, yes, I can see that this is from the Britannica.com website, which I did literally just copy and paste it from. So plagiarism checkers are sort of built in here for teachers to be able to check out student documents and see whether or not there is plagiarism in there. I'll just stop that because I wanted to talk about dictate. Dictate up here is great for students who need support with being able to get information from their head down onto their piece of paper. We know that there's a lot of processing challenges out there, and while they might be quite intelligent, they can't show us how intelligent they are. And so being able to click into a document here and basically press the little record. Once upon a time, there was a boy called Johnny. Johnny went to the park with his sister, and Mary had an accident. Missed half my words, but that's all right. Now, if I turn on punctuation here, it will also do punctuation. Once upon a time, there was a boy called Johnny. He went to the park with his sister, whose name is Mary. And what you can see in the second sentence here is that it's actually automatically doing punctuation for us, commas, full stops, and so forth. This is really interesting for kids who have processing disorders, who have challenges in getting ideas out of their head and putting them down on paper. So it's very, very useful. One of the other things, last thing I wanted to show you in this little section before we get you to do some thinking is this is a PowerPoint presentation sitting in the cloud. If you've got a phone, grab your phone out because I'm going to get you to take part in this presentation live. The scenario for this might be, imagine I'm running a parent night and I've got a lot of parents in my community who don't speak English as their first language. One of the things you can do is you can actually go present live from the browser version. And when I press present live, it looks a bit like this, and it puts this slide on the front. So if you grab your phone out now and scan that QR code, we're all very familiar with scanning QR codes now in many parts of the country. It'll take you to a browser, and you can see here that on my slide, I'm seeing how many people have joined my presentation. What you'll notice on your screen is that you'll start to see a transcript of exactly what the presenter is speaking at any one time. I'm now going to go to my, oh, people are still joining. I'm now going to go to my slides and start presenting my presentation in Latin by the looks of it. So just a bogus slides. But if you on your phone change the language from English to a different language, you will then see the transcript in whatever language you choose. So on your phone, if you're watching my presentation live, you can actually get a real-time Filipino translation of what I'm saying straight into the presentation. You've got my slides there, and you've got my voice coming through in Filipino language. Now, this is sort of the power of cloud-based technology, but if you think about a large room where you might have parents who are non-fluent speaking parents, them being able to choose their own language, and all you've got to do is put the QR code up on the screen. That's pretty cool. If you are my wife teaching the child in English, but their fluent language is Chinese, this might be a possibility for them too, to understand more of the stuff. The other thing you can do, you'll notice, is that you can react by putting smiley faces. You press on a little smiley face. Naturally, you can applaud or clap or whatever, give some feedback. And then I'm going to finish my presentation now, end the slideshow, and you will get you'll get a little notification saying, how was the presentation? Obviously 5 stars. And then you can give some ratings and whatever if you want to, and submit. And that then will give me a summary that says how well did my presentation go, which is interesting. So all of these examples here are really us thinking about the ways that we can start to help kids get access to technology, which is going to help them to learn more. One of the things that we did, and there's a little link for you down the bottom there to explore, is we created a parent kit, an inclusive classroom parent kit. And basically think about it as, instead of having someone from Microsoft be able to come out and show this stuff to your parent community, you could run a parent night. And the parent night is basically using slides. So you can see here what's in that link, aka.ms/ICPK, Inclusive Classroom Parent Kit. And there's a PowerPoint deck in there with a script of how you could deliver these sorts of demos. There's some handouts in there of what is Immersive Reader. It's the kind of thing that you might say down the track when you're launching your technology in the school. You might say, send out an invite to all parents, and any parents with students who would like to learn about a bit more of the inclusive technology that they can use, then they could come along to a parent night. And we've created all the slides and everything else for you, and it's always updated and it's ready to be used. So that's a resource for you that you can use. Okay, so something going on with timings in WA. Sorry, I'm just looking.
Sorry, Travis, Stephen here. I just sent the initial timings out, which were 8 till 11 rather than 8 till 11:30. So okay. WA people have to drop off. Sorry.
No worries. That's all right. So we'll wrap this up in 20 minutes or so, and if people have gone, that's okay. Let's have a bit more of a think then about and I've got another activity with the sticky notes. What have we covered? A lot of the stuff that we've covered has been sort of around hybrid learning. We've covered devices for learning. Both of those are kind of going to influence, although we haven't directly spoken about it, influence these possibilities here about, technology is never neutral. If, for example, I used to carry a camera around until cameras on a phone became good enough for me to take reasonable photographs. So technology is never neutral. Technology is always sort of making people think, oh, that's interesting, I could do this with it. And I've introduced you to a couple of different technologies today. We obviously had a look at the inclusion and accessibility technologies, a little bit of it. But really the idea for this part is to think about, what are we going to do as a result of this as school leaders? You've got your teachers going off and running attending different workshops. And it might be now about sort of going, okay, well, when they come back from doing the Inclusive Classroom one and the Microsoft Innovative Educator Trainer Academy, and I need to get all those people back in a room and work out what we're going to do with this to lead on to the next our next phase of our technology journey. We did the activity previously with the sticky notes. And so now what we've done is given a couple of hours worth of inputs and ideas and sort of things to get the juices flowing in the brain about what we might need to focus on. So it's now time to get out your second set of sticky notes, or the same coloured sticky notes, but this time you're going to put little negative, little minus sign up the top of each of the ones. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. And this time what you're going to do is you're going to be writing down what are some areas that we could improve in terms of our technology rollout at our school. So 3 minutes, one idea per sticky note, and we're going to put those down on our individual sticky notes. If you've got the same color, just a little negative, little minus sign at the top. So you can go positive, these are the things we're doing well. Negative, these are the things we've got an opportunity to work on. So I'll give you 3 minutes now to start playing around with sticky notes. One idea per sticky note. We'll be back after that. All right. So what you should have now is 2 sets of sticky notes. Ones which have little plus symbols in the top corner or are one color, and ones that are a different color or have a little negative, little minus sign in the top corner. One of the 2 documents that I asked you to print out has these 4 quadrants, 4 areas of the education transformation framework sort of printed out, one per page. The job here is to create what we call an opportunity map. And if you've done that activity together in a room, or if you've done that on your own, the opportunity is to get all your positive ones and all the ones we could work on and stick them around on top of these 4 quadrants of the education transformation framework. What it will show is that if you've got lots and lots of positive things under, learning spaces or future ready skills or whatever, knowing that we haven't deep dived into each of the 16 things, but just put them, if you're working together in a room, put duplicates kind of on top of each other or right next to each other so you can see that there's a number of them that say the same thing. And take 3 or 4 minutes to get all your sticky notes onto those 4 different the printout of the 4 different quadrants from the original documents. So I'm going to give you another 4 minutes to do that. And what you should end up with is an opportunity map that shows you areas of strength, an area of potential that you could work on in your school. So it is part of sort of creating that next steps, the tangible sort of vision setting for what we actually want to do next, what we are going to learn more about, and what we want to create. And then I'll give you some other tools that we can use for a similar purpose. So I'll go on mute, grab your 4 different quadrants you printed out, stick your sticky notes on them, and take a photo of it at the end, because you'll then get a nice little visual of which areas we are good at and which areas we could focus more on. Go for it. Okay, so what you should have now is an opportunity map, and that is a kind of list of areas of that education transformation framework, albeit arbitrary for you at the start, to sort of think about, hey, if these are things that school systems or schools focus on when they get it right, when it's really humming, how are we going? Have we got lots of positives everywhere? Do we have some gaps in our areas here? Are there, when we think about some of the things we need to work on or what we need to focus on, where are they clustering around our education transformation framework? Just to sort of give you a bit of an idea across those 16 areas, some of the things that you might need to consider. The next activity I want you to do is getting a little bit sharper towards setting some true goals for what you want to do. The other document that you downloaded on the first slide, just let me go open up the folder again for you so you can see what I'm talking about. So you've just used the one called ETF Elements with all the different colored hexagons on it. This one called Smart Goals is the other document that I asked you to print out. It's basically just a PowerPoint doc. You could use it in here, but you can just sort of print it out and scribble on it or whatever you want. It's one of the templates, and there are others, which I'll show you if you want to get deeper into this, that is kind of useful for starting to generate what it is we want to achieve as a goal in terms of our vision statement, in terms of, it could be just your vision around the use of technology for learning, could be used for a whole school vision as well. To ensure that you're using it, you should be actionable within 5 years, written in present tense, and some guidelines there. The second page of that is what I want to give you some time to have a think about. And so these are SMART goals, which I'm sure you've heard of before. SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And we've broken up this template just into those 4 different areas: leadership and policy, teaching and learning, intelligent environments, and student and school success. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes, three or 4 minutes, to grab this document. Hopefully you've got it printed out. And underneath those 4 different categories, based on all of your sticky notes you've got around the place, what are the key things in leadership and policy that we need to focus on as a leadership team? What are the, or do we need to put into place? What are the key things around teaching and learning from those areas? What are the intelligent environments bits and what are the student and school success bits? And it will come up with a bit of a list of what it is that we actually need to focus on next. And then you can have a crack at thinking about how we're going to measure it. You know, how we know when we've been successful in the right column with each of those things. So this is the document that you need to work on. The second page only, which is the one I've got on the screen there, I'll put a timer back up. And if you're in a group, in a room, then this will be easy for you to have a bit of a conversation and start working out your priorities. And if you're flying solo, then have a crack at thinking about what you think as a school you might need to focus on under these 4 areas. So I'll put another 4 minutes on the clock and give you some time to start listing those out from all your disparate sticky notes into some key next steps for your school. Okay, so hopefully you've started to synthesize down, organize some ideas of what you might focus on next. I'm interested to get some ideas of what people might do next. Am I going to do that by getting you to have a crack at this? So if you could go to, just on a browser window or on your phone, if you go to this link at the top, polev.com/Travis Smith 027. It's the name of this interactive thing here. So just open up a browser and go polev, polev.com/Travis Smith 027.
I've just put that in the chat for them too, Trav.
Thank you. I've just changed it into a clickable link in the chat too. So basically what I want you to do is if you put your school name first, and so in the same box, so Fred Boggs College dash, what are you going to do next? What's one of the things on that sheet that you've thought about? What's one area that you're thinking, hey, we really need to have a look at this. We need to focus on that. We really need to think more about this element or that element. What is it that you're thinking about now that potentially you weren't before we started? So Norfolk Island Central School gets dialysis to your students. Yeah, so that's exactly the kind of thing. Put your school name first, and then no worries, Katrina, thank you. And then what is one thing on your sheet? Focus around teaching and learning. Good. Technology is really, it can have a huge impact on teaching and learning, but it's most powerful when in the hands of great practitioners doing great activities with kids. BYOD or no compromise device. ASCII workflow policies for staff. Yeah, email versus Teams versus chat is a really interesting one. And so maybe the teachers can unpack that a little bit more in one of their sessions. We've noticed certainly that our email levels have gone right down since we started using Teams. You could argue that it's just sort of displacing or replacing one sort of means of communication with another, but it's really it really does change the dynamic of, it moves you away from creating an email that you send to someone that they might get back to tomorrow, period 3, when they've got the next lesson off. It changes the dynamic of that. Building capacity for staff is something that's really important. And so that's why we want to do the MAE trainer program for your teachers, so that you've got a couple of people who've got all access to the behind the scenes Microsoft training gear that they can sort of use with your teachers. Setting up a structure for teams is a good one, to make sure that you've got that right. And I gave you some templates there. Sustainable operations and strategic planning for communications between staff, students, and parents is a really good one. How do we do that better? How do we make sure that we get those lines of communication? And as I said before, Teams doesn't do that as well as some other products yet. But still, you could wrap another product into it by embedding that into their team space. 3-year plan, yeah. Someone's written a really good one there about what tools to use when and how. For example, we've got Teams and Sector and OneDrive and OneNote, and it's kind of, when do we start to reduce the double ups, as someone said there, and set some clear expectations of, here's the technology suite we're providing, and here's kind of what you do with each of them, and here's how they fit together. Certainly in our experience, that's the role that sort of Teams plays very well, because you can put, so teachers who use Moodle or use Sector or use Compass for a learning management system, sometimes they, it might be a year 10 mathematics class, they have their team, and then the page from Sector or from Blackboard or from Moodle or from whatever docks in across the top of their Teams environment. So there's still that one place to go for all of their things. Coaching is a really interesting thing I saw somewhere mentioned. We actually run a peer coaching course as well. Oh, the poll is full. Yes, it might be because I haven't paid for it, Dave. It's I'm using the free version. Oops. So coaching is a really interesting one too, because coaching is more about teaching people to have deep conversations around things and listen, because teachers were very good at talking, rather than trying to solve people's problems for them. So we sort of use a formal coaching model that we work on with staff. It's very it's an interesting approach. Okay, thank you very much. I can see that the poll is full, so I shall move on, and I may not have got to yours. In the folder, there is another resource that might be useful for you. I'm just trying to find my page here. Here we go. Under additional activity templates, we're not going to have a chance to do this today, but under additional activity templates, let me show you a couple of things that are in here. There's something called the placemat activity, and there's something called success factors. They might be something you could take away to use with your team. They're under additional activities. What are they? One of them, the placemat activity, looks like this. And it basically unpacks each of those four and gets you thinking about, what is your vision for transformation? Are all the stakeholders brought in, for example? How are decisions on strategies and policy made? All of these things are sort of discussion starters or prompts. And if you want to go a little bit further, the other document in there, actually, I realize that that's a very small slide, but you can have a look because you've got access to the files. This goes another level deeper. So it says, if you're looking at, for example, this one here is about leader and educator professional development, it breaks it out into level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and recommendations at each of those levels. So if you're wanting to focus on, or if your sticky notes showed that there are areas that you really need to focus on, then these deeper documents might be useful for you to go away and have a look at, print these out, you've got access to them, and then you can sort of deep dive into some of these. So let me finish off, because we're nearly done, with some resources for you. One of the biggest resources that we have for educators, and your teachers will be playing in this quite a bit, is the Microsoft Educator Center. It is free PD for every teacher on the planet, and it's available for them to take courses, to do learning, anything from 1-hour courses to 30-hour learning paths, and they're all in teacher voice. So it's about how teachers could use OneNote for, creating great learning for kids or whatever. So they're not training courses, they're not training videos, but they teach teachers how to use this stuff in the context of teaching and learning. And so my recommendation with that, when your teachers come back from the MIE sessions, is to sit down with those teachers and say, what are the top 3 courses we think in here that are all free might be useful for our teachers to take if we're going on this journey? And so curate them for them rather than just send them in here for a bit of a search around, because they might get lost. Resources for you. We will put the recording of this plus the slides. I'll put them into the folder this afternoon. So you've got that STP leaders folder there, and there will be a subfolder there that you can get the resources from. The links to the Education Transformation Framework is there. The hybrid learning paper is there, the one that Michael Fulham was involved in that I touched on earlier. There's a link to the Educator Center. There's a tool, if you're really keen, called the Edu Journey tool. And it kind of does a bit of an analysis of where your school is at, and talks about also the technology side of things. So it allows you to go to a website and answer some questions with your community, maybe a little leadership team around this. And some of it's technical, some of it's more productivity in the classroom or student learning tools or whatever. But it does give you a little report that allows you to potentially see some next steps if you're interested in using that tool. And the last thing there I put in is a link to the Inclusive Classroom Parent Kit, which is those pre-made resources that you could run a inclusive classroom session for your parents at school if that's something of interest to you. So with that, I will say thank you very much. And there's my email address if you wanted to contact me at all. But just know that the idea of today was to expose you to some of the technology bits as well as get you thinking about the bigger picture, because one is useless without the other. You don't know what's possible to start planning for if you haven't seen it, and you don't, and without giving enough time to do some planning or some thinking about the bigger picture elements around education transformation, it's kind of hard to set big lofty goals. So no doubt lots to think about. No doubt that's been a bit of a whirlwind tour, but we have your teachers doing a 2-day course with us, and we have your leaders and your teachers around inclusive classroom and your IT people doing some work with us as well. So there are lots of different touch points, and the suggestion would be pull that group of people together back in a few weeks and say, right, what do we get out of this thing? How do we shape our vision for what we want to do moving forward, and lean on all of the different people who are involved in that. So with that, I will turn off my camera and turn off my microphone. You can leave the call now, and I'll hang around and answer some questions in the chat if there's people who want to ask anything specific. So thanks very much. Have a great afternoon.
Amazing session, Mr. Travis Smith. I've just turned off the unmute button. So if anyone does want to ask Travis a lovely question about anything that you've seen today, feel free to use the chat or turn on your microphone. Lots of positive feedback there, Trav. Well done. That chat going wild.